Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, officers and members, and welcome to the Development Control Committee meeting on the 23rd of March 2016. First of all, for your safety, I must read out the fire evacuation procedures, which are: there are no fire alarms scheduled for this evening. Therefore, if the fire alarm sounds, please evacuate the building immediately. The fire exits are located at the rear and the side of the room, and you go down the stairs and we meet in the War Memorial Park. Please note this meeting is being webcast live on the internet. Yes, all right. And would you, all members and public, please switch off your phones or turn them to silent. Thank you. Next. The main agenda. Apologies for absence and substitutions. I have Councillor Tomlin replaced by Councillor Tilbury, and Councillor Mrs. Tucker is replaced by Councillor Richards. Declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest, members? No. Thank you. Urgent matters. I have none. Members? No. Minutes of the previous meeting held on the 23rd of February 2016. Are members happy that I sign these later on? Thank you. And then we move to, for the benefit of the members of the public attending, I'd like to explain who everybody around this table is. My name is Councillor Donald Sherlock, and I am the chairman of this committee, and beside me is Councillor David Leeks, who is the deputy chairman. Down the sides of the table to the left and right are the councillors who sit on the committee and who will be making the decision on the application this evening. Immediately to my left and right are the officers who will be advising the councillors. In addition, I'd like to explain that the Development Control Committee is a regulatory committee and not a political meeting. The committee will be looking at the evidence brought before us tonight excuse me, and will make a decision based on planning reasons. We are guided by national and local guidance and policy, and I do understand that planning can be emotive, and I ask that everyone remains polite and professional throughout the evening and conduct themselves accordingly. May I ask all speakers, including visiting members, to speak clearly and to return to their seats once their presentation is complete. No further dialogue between members of the committee and speakers will be permitted once questioning has finished. And finally, may I ask all committee members to avoid repetition, and I ask members to keep comments on each item to a maximum of 4 minutes. Thank you. Now we move to item number 5, which is the applications for planning permission and public participation thereon. And item number 1, which is land between Winchester Road and Mitcheldever Road in Whitchurch. And I have as speakers Mr. Andy Jordan for the Town Council, objectors Jackie Novis and Mrs. J. Brooks, in support Ian Johnson, agent, and both ward councillors, Councillor Watts and Dunlop, and the item will be introduced by Catherine Fitzherbert Green. Thank you, Catherine.
Thank you, Chairman. The application you have before you is for outline planning permission, and it is seeking the erection of 100 dwellings with the formation of new access onto Winchester Road, together with the associated works to facilitate such a development, together with coach parking and parent drop-off to serve the adjacent Tesbourne School, and associated open space and recreational facilities. The application is actually, as I said, in outline. We are considering the principle of development with consideration of access only. If I just take members quickly to the update paper. Unfortunately, it is fairly lengthy, but in summary, we have comments from the viewing panel that was held last week, together with additional comments from our ecologist. We have a summary of 5 additional letters that have been received since the report was produced, and those letters are all in objection to the application. You additionally have an officer comment in response to the issues that have been raised, together with slight amendment to the recommendation. And following that, we also have some amended conditions. And this application is recommended for permission. Thank you.
Thank you. Right. First of all, to speak for the Town Council, Mr. Andy Jordan. You have 4 minutes, Mr. Jordan. I will give you a minute's warning at the end.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I hope not to take anywhere near 4 minutes. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Councillor Andy Jordan, I'm the Deputy Chair for Whitchurch Town Council. This proposed development that you've just been briefed on now forms a pivotal part of the Whitchurch Neighbourhood Plan, which councillors will be aware has concluded Regulation 14 consultation and will be shortly submitted for Regulation 15 consultation and review. The proposed development has been subject to public consultation as part of the Neighbourhood Plan process in October 14 and was one of the most favoured sites for larger scale development in Whitchurch. The developers worked closely with both the Town Council and our neighbourhood planning team. They have been as sensitive as possible to local residents' concerns, and especially the parking issues on Winchester Road, and we look forward to further continued cooperation and dialogue with them to address any residual or further concerns that local residents may raise. We note the developers' reasons for submitting an outline application now, and that is because when we went to Regulation 14 consultation, other developers became aware that perhaps their proposals would not be supported and started to submit applications. In summary, Mr. Chairman, Whitchurch Town Council fully supports the application before you this evening and would request that the authority approve it accordingly. That's all I have to say. Are there any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Jordan. Any members, any questions for Mr. Jordan? Councillor Taylor.
Thank you. Mr. Jordan, you said that in the consultation on the neighbourhood plan it was the most favoured site by the public. Is there any way you can quantify this? I mean, how favoured was it? Was it 9 out of 10 people or only 5 out of 10? Is there any way you can just quantify what most favoured means? I mean, it could be that the other sites are all hated.
I think I said it was one of the most favoured, to be accurate, and I did not bring the neighbourhood plan data with me. It is a matter of public record. We had over 500 people submit returns, and in terms of the large-scale developments, this, I believe, was ranked number 1.
Thank you. Any more questions? Councillor Tilbury.
Oh yes, you referred to the Winchester Road traffic. What proposals are there? I mean, I actually am from Overton, so I know Winchester Road very well when I go down to the school, and it's absolute mayhem down there because of the parking on that side. Are they proposing to put double yellow lines down there opposite the junction, or, you know, what are you going to do to improve the traffic? Because we also know that in that area, the buses were recently rerouted all through Whitchurch because they couldn't actually get through London Road, so it's not just Winchester Road. I mean, I'm surprised the Town Councillor don't seem to have an issue with the increase in traffic from this development.
Well, as you'll be aware, traffic is the major issue for Whitchurch. This development itself doesn't directly impact on the areas that you're mentioning. The junction you're referring to is the bottom of Mitchell-Dever Road and Winchester Road. The access to this site is about 400 metres further down the road towards the A34. Yes, there's going to be an increase in traffic. All the traffic surveys that we've undertaken as part of the neighbourhood plan would indicate that a majority, but not all, of the traffic at peak times would seek to head to the A34 and head south. But yes, there is going to be an increase in traffic. No, there is no proposal on the part of Whitchurch Town Council to alter parking on Whitchurch Road, Winchester Road, I beg your pardon, further in towards the town. The parking concerns that were expressed by residents related to the area immediately surrounding the access to the new development and the potential loss of parking there. The developer has adjusted the access plan to ensure that those residents retain their street parking.
Thank you. Any more questions? Thank you very much, Mr. Jordan. Next, please, can I have Jackie Novis and Mrs. J. Brooks? You will have 4 minutes between you, and I will give you a minute's notice at the end. And you press the big bar on bigger of the on the press your microphone. Yeah, the big.
There are many reasons why we believe this application should be refused. Firstly, we fully agree with the landscape officer objecting to this development on the grounds it will have an adverse impact on the landscape character and visual amenity, and how the retention of key landscape characteristics will not outweigh the harm caused. Mitigation measures of new planting, which the applicant acknowledges won't be fully established for approximately 15 years, is not enough to justify destroying this landscape. This development will see the destruction of farmland, the habitat of numerous species of wildlife, including those on the UK BAP priority list, species-rich hedgerows, and part of footpath 29 that has remained undisturbed for years and is prized for its recreational and amenity value. The loss of this prime agricultural land is not insignificant, and we can't overemphasise its importance, especially as it has a higher level stewardship agreement which is still being managed and doesn't expire until 2021. The UK's population is increasing, and we have a duty to improve food contribution, not reduce land that is already providing it. The planning officer has confirmed the access will impact upon the street scene, which goes against guidance within the Whitchurch design statement that says street scenes should not be destroyed by vehicle access arrangements. The design statement also lists this street scene as one of the 6 most favoured views in Whitchurch and says that favoured views should be retained. Placing an access road to an existing line of residential properties is totally inappropriate, and the applicant's back dormouse and extended phase 1 surveys all recommend it is located where a more natural gap in hedgerows is already present. We don't believe the unacceptable impact on the amenities of the residents bordering this road and the unbearable intrusion and loss of privacy has been given the consideration it deserves. We question the conclusion the impact will be insignificant, especially as the applicant's air and odour survey doesn't appear to assess this road's impact on those residents, and the noise survey appears to use incorrect data to access noise levels and refers to receptors next to these residents' properties that were never physically placed there. We are concerned about the amount of conflicting, incorrect and out-of-date information in the applicant's documentation. For example, a third-party landowner who is shown on the Land Registry's records has been omitted from Certificate B. We also don't consider all the observations made by the Highway Officer have been properly addressed in the traffic addendum. Finally, we also question the need for this development at the present time to house Whitchurch people on the current waiting list, especially when Basingstoke Council have shelved plans to build 25 rural exception homes on their land at the Nolins due to insignificant numbers needing them. Even Councillor Watts has publicly said there shouldn't be a burst of house building, providing more homes than are currently needed by local people. Incidentally, in the neighbourhood plan, this site was voted 6th out of 9th based on the border scores. We urge you to please reject this application.
1 minute to go.
100 houses mean an extra 100 plus cars using Winchester Road, which already has a large volume of traffic going to and from the A34. As Hurstbourne Prior Parish Council have observed, cars and vans are already using alternative routes. Their main concern is usage of Nuns Walk, Paper Mill Lane, what is at the moment a difficult situation and will surely become a hazardous situation. There are 2 bus stops, but no buses to Basingstoke, Andover or the station, so cars are a necessary item. School buses will have to cope with speeding cars going to and from the A34, another dangerous situation, especially when turning right from the proposed site. More cars, more congestion, leading to hazardous condition for all drivers using Winchester Road, especially for emergency services. This is not a good area to put more houses or a site entrance, in my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you both. Any questions? Councillor Bound.
Could you tell me where you live in relation relation to this site?
I live at the north of the town, nowhere near that site.
Nowhere near it.
No.
On Winchester Road.
Oh, is it me?
Yes,
Do I have to press
switch
that
yours
button?
off. Then you can switch yours on, Michael.
Do you want me to ask the question again?
Yes, please.
Okay. Could you tell me where you live, please?
Sorry, we'll get there. I live to the north of the town, nowhere near that site. I'm just fully aware of, you know, where it is.
I live at Winchester Road. It's not absolutely near the site, but it's near enough to be a problem for me as far as driving, parking, etc. I'm near Mitchell Devil Road, which is also another hazard place.
Sorry, could I just say one thing, that I am speaking for a lot of all the other people, so they technically do live near the site. I want to just
Yeah,
say
there
that.
are 8 people wanting
Okay.
to object.
Thank you. Any more questions, members? Councillor Richards.
You brought up the subject of the agricultural land. May I ask, what in the last 2 years have been the crops grown on this land?
Sorry, I couldn't be 100% sure, and I just know that there are crops there regularly all year round, and like I say, there is a higher level stewardship agreement that the farmer has on that runs out in 2021. Thank you.
Any more questions, members? Nope. Thank you both very much indeed. Next, please, Mr. Ian Johnson in support. You will have 4 minutes, Mr. Johnson, and I'll give you a minute's notice at the end.
Thank you, Chairman. My name is Ian Johnson. I'm here speaking in support of this application on behalf of David Wilson Holmes, the applicant. The recommendation of the Planning Department to members to grant planning permission is welcomed and is a reflection of the hard work that's gone into this application over the last 2 years, ensuring that the proposal reflects the opinions of the majority of local people. I would also like to compliment the officer for a clear, well-balanced and concise committee report. Members, it had been my intention to be sat here, I have to say, presenting to you a full planning application. However, recognising Whitchurch is coming under increased pressure for major development, our hand was forced and the decision was taken to bring forward this application in outline whilst we continue to progress the site as an allocation in the Whitchurch neighbourhood plan. Our pre-application public consultation and stakeholder engagement has been extensive, and if I may, this has involved meetings with Testbourne Community School since May 2014, constant collaborative working with the Town Council and the Neighbourhood Plan Steering Group since July 2014, a pre-application consultation exercise with the Borough Council in November of the same year. There have been 3 public exhibitions as part of the Neighbourhood Plan consultations. They were during October 2014, and a further exhibition providing more detailed information was held in September 2015. So as a result, this proposal has been tailored to provide the following tangible benefits for Whitchurch. There's 100 houses on a site allocated within a draft neighbourhood plan on a site that is not subject to or even close to any statutory or non-statutory designations for landscape, ecology, flood risk, historic importance, and this is reflected, as members will note, from the committee report. There are no objections from Hampshire County Council, Environment Agency, Natural England, Highways England, or Historic England. A wide choice of high-quality homes built to Building for Life standard. This is now recognised as a best practice within the construction industry, and which David Wilson Holmes has corporately signed up to on all of their sites. A housing proposal immediately adjacent to Testbourne Community School and within comfortable walking distance of the town centre, with a safe, I have to say, a safe access onto Winchester Road, which we have altered to meet the request of the local residents. 20 affordable homes for families and individuals on the housing register who are looking at the moment for a house for rent or shared ownership. A new bus and parent parking facility which, as members may be aware, at the moment the buses at school drop off. There are highway safety concerns for the children on Mitchell Devon Road.
1 minute to go.
Bringing that into the site, taking that risk away and putting the bus facility into the site. 3.6 hectares of informal public green space. Now that is over 4.5 times the council's standard for a housing development of this size. There are 3 sports pitches, as members are probably aware, designed to Football Association standards, to be transferred to the Town Council with a commuted sum, a sports changing facility, and a range of financial contributions in accordance with the Council's supplementary planning document. So in summary, the proposal will provide much needed market and affordable family housing to improve funding to improve local schools, new sports facilities, open space for the benefit of new and existing residents. The site is accessible to local services and is not designated, as I say, for environmental sensitivity. So by approving this application, the Council will be facilitating the delivery of much needed market and affordable housing and to help redress the Council's shortfall at the moment in the housing land supply. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Johnson from members? Councillor Tilbury.
Sorry.
Oh, yeah, thank you, Mr. John. You referred to the bus facility. Is it proposed? I mean, it's sort of mentioned in the report, but the access isn't part of this application. Are you proposing to have all the school buses? Because I'm aware, I think only 2 weeks ago, they passed another application to improve the existing bus bays in school in Mitchell Devon Road. So there seems to be some confusion as to, are they looking to put all the buses onto your site there, or on the other side? I guess it's going to be sort of a bit of each.
Thank you, Councillor. Well, the proposal is to have a bus loop that we've been working with the school, held several meetings with the school, and they now have the option to route all of their buses off Mitchell Devon Road into the application site. Thank you.
Any more questions, members? Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Next, please, Councillor Watts or Councillor Dunlop, which... You will have 4 minutes, Councillor, and I'll give you a minute's notice at the end.
Good evening, councillors. I've been in support of this particular application for at least 5 years from the day it was conceived. I won't dwell on the obvious short-term benefits to the town and for the people living in Mitchell Devon Road and the fact it's going to improve the traffic flows. I'm looking at the benefit of the sporting facilities which will be offered to the school, and I'm also looking for the long-term benefit, because this development will pave the way to the way which I see Whitchurch expanding in the future. That's all I have to say, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Any questions for Councillor Dunlop? No? Thank you very much. Councillor Watts. Councillor Watts, you'll have 4 minutes and then you get a minute's notice at the end. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I've been on the council for nearly 9 years, and I've always been in favour of houses being built. The reason I'm in favour of houses being built is I know people who need houses, and that's the reason I'm supporting this application. Not anything to do with the government 5-year land supply. That is a bit of a joke, actually, because 18 months ago you granted permission for 83 houses in Whitchurch. The inspector since then has granted permission for 40, and not a blade of grass has moved in that time, although it does mean that there's a blue tick somewhere in Whitehall about land supply. I did explain to the inspector that Whitchurch has a 5-year land supply, but he explained in 2 very short sentences that that wasn't good enough. So I am convinced that this developer does intend to build houses, and I should certainly be very disappointed if they don't. and we have people in Whitchurch who need housing, just as the rest of the borough does. Ms Brooks, I think, referred to the decision not to go ahead with an exception site. Well, of course, an exception site is only that if all of the planned opportunities are not there. We have a local plan that requires, under the latest words, a minimum of 350 new homes over the local plan period. And the neighbourhood plan committee has worked extremely hard to identify this 100 as the major site there. The question as to whether it came top or not is a little bit odd in this consultation. Actually, this site had the most people against and the most people in favour. So you can use your own words to describe that. Obviously, I do recognise the two ladies who are here as generally representatives of the substantial amount of opposition to this. But if you look at Whitchurch, now our allotments have got permission. Find somewhere that isn't a green field where you can build houses. And this is agricultural land. The great majority of that land is agricultural land. So we have to make hard decisions, tough decisions. I love this area, the walk that goes through the middle of the site and goes a very long way. I think this application looks after that as best it can by preserving the local footpath nature of the path that's there. So I do ask you to look after it. As far as the school's concerned, Councillor Tilbury was asking, yes, I mean, we have all our planning applications in the wrong order. Unfortunately, we can't do anything about that. The school was certain that it wanted to go ahead with its proposal, and they weren't going to withdraw it anticipating this. This is the site that, in fact, Councillor Dunlop, as the school governor, was instrumental in advocating. And then the head teacher and the governors will decide who goes where. But we get buses from quite a lot of places down there. The playing field site, the town council has signed heads of agreement with the landowners to take that over. Some of it will be available to the school to share if they want to. So this, I think, meets all of our aspirations except our aspiration not to build on green fields. And there isn't a bit of land isn't a green field, and indeed there isn't a little bit of land in Whitchurch whose owner doesn't think it's building land either. Please support this application.
Thank you, Councillor Watts. Any questions for Councillor Watts? No? Okay, thank you very much, Councillor. Right, members, questions to officers? Councillor Westbrook, followed by Councillor Bowyer.
Thank you, Chair. It's a highways question, really. Mr Johnson touched on discussions that have been had with local residents as to the new access point off the main road there. Our drawings are so small, it's difficult to see the detail. It looks to me like there's a couple of separate entrance points to the existing homes. Could you just explain the new access in a bit more detail, please, and how it's helped the residents?
Thank you, Chairman. What you see there is well, to all intents and purposes, it's a standard bell mouth to the site from the main Winchester Road. You've got a 6.1 metre wide road. The two grey half moons that you see there are actually overrun areas so that the larger vehicles like the school buses and similar can still actually make the turn without interfering with any traffic that's leaving the site. As you progress to the right from the giveaway line, you have a crossing which is the existing service road to the premises. To the north, the two properties that remain, the service road and vehicle tracking, shows that those two properties can be served. Equally to the south, where the service road is severed, the existing properties again can be served, and the vehicle tracking diagram shows that that is possible. Where you've got then the red line running north to south, you actually progress into the site with a 6.1 metre road. To the north of that then is a 3 metre shared footway cycleway. The two dotted sort of green hatched areas, I believe, are landscaping, and then you progress into the site. But there's no further detail because this is an outline application with access only to be determined.
And the two, because I can't see the detail very well, the two black blobs there where it crosses, where it could possibly, potentially, they're blocked off, I guess.
Yes, I mean that's the tactile paving and allowing for the crossing and the blocking off for vehicles north to south.
Councillor Bowyer.
Thank you, Chairman. Could I just ask the officer, the gentleman mentioned 20 affordable homes on this site, but isn't our norm 40% affordable housing? So can you tell me how they only get to 20 homes?
We are actually seeking the full provision of affordable housing on this site, which is 40%, equivalent of 40 dwellings. I think the reference to 20 homes may be 20 people on the waiting list waiting for such homes, as opposed to actual numerical provision of the housing itself. But we are seeking the full amount through the legal agreement.
Councillor Tilbury.
Can I ask on the highways, the access is shown obviously going straight through and through where the bungalow is at the moment, which will be knocked down there. Obviously it cuts across the existing service road and the residents there will have their access blocked off, which seems a bit unfair, but I mean, it seems to be this is a very odd access. I appreciate that's why they've done it that way, but it's going across a piece of land. As we've seen from the update, it appears they don't actually know who owns the land, which seems to be a rather strange state of affairs. I appreciate there's an amendment to the proposed one to deal with that there, but you know, surely if you're having discussions about something as major as, and of course the thing we're looking at is the means of access, and surely finding out who the landowner is what I thought would have been a rather obvious priority for me if I was the landowner or the one who owns the field. But it does seem a bit unfair that we're sort of taking away the access road to those properties there. They're going to be disadvantaged to put a road through there, which they're now going to use. They're going to take all the traffic off the existing road, Mitchell Dever Road, and put all the school buses into this road, which is probably good news for people in Mitchell Dever Road, but less good news for the people in Winchester Road. Could officers give us some ideas, you know, let's get some clarity on this, because, you know, how can we have a situation where we don't actually know who owns the land? You know, surely that is, they have to certify that when they put the application in. It does seem a bit strange that this has come up at this late date.
First, addressing the matter of the certificate, when an application is submitted, we have to be certain that we know that the people that own the land have been notified. The query has arisen very late in the day, hence why we have the amended recommendation in the update paper before you, so we can make sure that nobody has been disadvantaged, that nobody who owns that land has not been appropriately notified of the application. In terms of the access for the existing properties, they will still be able to retain access to their properties. That doesn't change. What they won't be able to do is go along the full route of the service road. So yes, we will have new traffic going through. There would be a new impact, but that's part of the balancing exercise of this particular development in this location.
Thank you. Any more questions? No? Debate? Do I have any?
On the noise report, it refers to, someone referred to the, it refers to the receptors at the, it appears that this is purely, when they refer to modelling, it seems to me that they have just modelled this, because it actually claims in the officer's report now that the people who live in the existing houses in this area won't see any more noise, where they've obviously never stood next to a school bus. That's all I can say is.
In terms of the noise report was submitted with the application. It has been subject to consultation with your environmental health officers. They have not raised any objection, but you will also note from the conditions imposed within the agenda before you, there are conditions in there referring to noise matters. So as such, we have no objection before you on noise grounds.
Councillor Richards.
Yes, sorry, I'm late onto the committee. I'm subbing at the last minute. But I have read the papers, and I did notice that this site is very close to sewage works. and there was some work done on assessing odour and so on. I mean, I don't know this particular site at all. I wasn't there for the viewing. But can you tell me how close it is to the sewage works, and whether, what makes you feel that this is not going to impair the well-being of the people living nearby?
Yeah, just to assist members in relation to the position of the sewage works, if you look on the very southern boundary of the site, you will see a grey line, a fat grey line. That's an access road which does go to a wastewater treatment works, which actually sits south and off the plan before you, as my colleague's just indicating the position of that road. The application has been subject to an odour assessment, and as a consequence, when we look at the potential layout of the site, as you will see, there is a suggestion in the illustrative plan before you that an area of open space could sit in closest proximity to that wastewater treatment works, which again is off-site, and therefore that has been considered satisfactory to ensure that the potential properties on the land won't be adversely affected. Again, I'll just draw your attention, in the report you have no objection on odour grounds from your environmental health officers.
Any more?
In view that nobody's really debating it much, I'll move the recommendation.
We have to confirm that we're in debate. Oh, Councillor Potter.
So easily forgotten. It's okay. I'm not going to make a proposal at this juncture, but I just think for the public record, people need to understand, our role as a planning committee. I mean, the implications of the NPPF, the National Planning Policy Framework, shouldn't be misunderstood, I think, really, in terms of the presumption in favour of sustainable development, which really runs as this golden thread, really, through all of our decision making, and I think people need to understand the influence that has upon us, really. Quite unusually, in a way, we find ourselves, don't we, I think, in a situation where there is this work that's been done, good work, on a neighbourhood plan. Sounds to me as though there's been substantial consultation on that as well. But inevitably, within any of those planned processes, you're going to find people in support and people who object. Those that live closest to the site in question probably are going to be the main objectors, and I think Councillor Watt said it was pretty evenly balanced in that regard, but that's the nature of the democracy that applies in terms of the preparation of neighbourhood plans. But overall, it seems to me from the evidence we have that the town of Whitchurch is in support of this site, and it is one of the chosen and preferred sites within the neighbourhood plan, and I think we actually have to have due regard for that. In regard to the sites that are available in Whitchurch, as again has been pointed out, and all of us would wish it were different, I think, really, but again, we're bound, because of the NPPF, to be trying to find opportunist sites of this nature anyway. It is a greenfield site. It is an agricultural status site, but nevertheless, it lends itself to housing development, and on that basis I think there's substantial support and evidence that suggests that the officer's recommendation in regard to this application is correct.
Thank you, Councillor Potter.
I just move the recommendation, Chairman. I don't know whether Councillor Potter was going to.
Do I have a seconder? Councillor Goodison, thank you. Right, I have a proposer and a seconder for approval. Those in favour, raise your hands, please. Unanimous? No? Those against? Thank you. Abstentions? None. Will you sum up, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to confirm, this application has been recommended for permission. And that would be subject to the update paper with the amended conditions and also the conditions and informatives within the agenda before you. Thank you.
Thank you for that. We now move to item number 2, land at Langdale, Woods Lane, Cliddesden. And we'll just wait till the Whitchurch people have gone. Right, item 2. This was deferred from previous times, so there are no public speakers, and the officer presenting, Lisa Sowden. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This is an outline application for 2 detached dwellings within the existing curtilage of Langdale, a single-storey property at Woods Lane. The application is considering the principle, the access and layout at this point in time, with matters of detail reserved for later consideration. The site is located to the rear of the existing property. The site is also within the settlement policy boundary for Cliddesden and close to the conservation area. As Councillor Sherlock already said, the application was deferred from the February 23rd committee to allow members to view the site, and the notes from that viewing are set out in the update paper. The recommendation is for approval as per the main report.
Thank you. Questions to officers, members? Are there any? No? Let us debate it, therefore. Does anybody want to start it off? Councillor Potter.
Sorry, I can't help myself, can I? But I think at the last meeting, it's honest of me to say that we got to a situation following the discussions that we had where I was close to moving the recommendation for approval, but we were then persuaded, I think, obviously to defer and have a site visit. I have to say, from my personal point of view, I saw nothing on the site visit that persuaded me differently to what the officers were recommending. And on that basis, I certainly on this occasion would move approval.
Thank you, Councillor. Do I have any seconders? Thank you, Councillor Bound. I have a proposer and a seconder for approval. Those in favour? Those against? Abstentions? The motion is carried. Would you, Lisa, sum up? Thank you.
So the application is approved for the reasons and conditions as set out in the main paper.
We now move to item 3, which is land at Hollington Lane, Woolton Hill. And speaking, we have from the Parish Town Council, John Murdoch. Objectors, Mr. and Mrs. Hobson. In support, Mike Fowler. And the Ward Councillor, Councillor Sanders. But it will be introduced by Lisa Sowden, please.
Thank you, Chair. This is a full application for 4 dwellings located in a courtyard arrangement on a parcel of land just outside the settlement boundary of Woolton Hill. The site also lies within the area of outstanding natural beauty. The update paper notes the viewing panel viewing points that was carried out last week, and the attendance by that viewing from representatives of the Parish Council and the Ward Councillor. The application also includes a requirement for off-site affordable housing contribution given the area of the site and its location within the countryside. Therefore, the recommendation is for approval subject to the completion of a legal agreement to secure that and for the conditions set out in the main paper.
Thank you. And now may I have John Murdoch, please. Mr. Murdoch, you'll have 4 minutes, and I'll give you a minute's notice at the end. Thank you.
Good evening. John Murdoch, Vice Chair, Eastwood Parish Council. Eastwood Parish Council understands that there is an alleged presumption in favour of sustainable development. However, we submit that in this instance presumption is outweighed by other material considerations. The parish of East Woody sits wholly within the North Wessex Downs area of outstanding natural beauty. East Woody Parish Council, supported by the AONB Planning Advisor, consider that building on this greenfield site would be an unsustainable and significant intrusion into the countryside, causing harm to the significant character and appearance of the local landscape. Both the Borough Council and national policies seek to protect such intrusion. The NPPF states that great weight should be given to conserving the landscape in areas of outstanding natural beauty. The proposed site is not within the built-up area of Walton Hill, nor is it within the settlement policy boundary. In January of this year, a planning application for a single dwelling in this parish was refused on the grounds that the proposed development was unsustainable. We submit that the application now under consideration is unsustainable for exactly the same reasons. These were as follows: that it is situated away from a local service centre where employment services and other facilities are provided close together, providing good accessibility. The occupants of the proposed development and their visitors would be likely to rely on the private motor car, as there would not be reasonable opportunity to travel by public transport and walking. The proposal would not deliver sustainable development and is contrary to the aims of the NPPF and SAFE policies E1 and A2 of the current local plan. The reasons for refusal that I've just quoted apply equally to this site. There is no safe walking distance from the proposed development to any of the facilities in the parish. Walking to the nearest shop, a small post office, would take in the order of 30 minutes, and importantly, there is no pavement or street lighting on the road from the site to the nearest school. Had the council's site visit taken place at school drop-off or pick-up times, they would have witnessed the high volume of school traffic on this road, adding to the danger. Because of local concern about pedestrian safety on this road, East Woody Parish Council is creating a permissive footpath across the nearby parish field. And although the path will provide a safer walking route for some residents during daylight hours, it will unfortunately not overcome the safety issues of walking to or from this site. The local bus service is infrequent. There is no identified need for additional housing in our parish.
1 minute to go.
However, in the emerging local plan, 10 dwellings have been allocated to be built between 2011 and 2029. 49 houses are currently under construction in Harwood Paddock, Walton Hill, so the target has already been met 4 times over. Finally, if planning permission is granted in respect of this site, it will encourage the development of adjacent land and other land equally outside the village boundary. Such ribbon development would irreversibly change the much valued rural nature of the parish. East Woody Parish Council requests that this application be refused.
Thank you, Mr. Murdoch. Any questions? Councillor Westbrook.
Thank you, Mr. Murdoch. You mentioned about the walking and the pedestrian issues along on there. In our report, it actually says that the lane is one of the observers, one of the objectors, I believe, letters picked up that the lane is unable to accommodate 2-lane traffic. But it actually states that there are many horses, pedestrians and bike riders who traverse the lane. So it sort of sounds like there's a little bit of a contradiction here. I wonder if you could help with that, please.
Sorry. That's it. There are very few roads in this particular part of this parish, so it is the only available thoroughfare, and that's the reason why it has to be used. It's a simple matter of fact. As I say, we have tried to create an alternative route on a footpath, but that won't suffice, I'm afraid.
Councillor Potter.
Hello, sir. Obviously, we'll make our decision on this application and this application alone, but I just wanted to check. I mean, when we went on the site visit, we were looking at the, I think, adjacent properties in Hollington Lane, and then further up on the other side of the lane, there was some substantial properties, obviously, that we couldn't help but notice. I mean, is it the fact that all of those fall outside of the settlement policy boundary?
If you're referring to the houses between this site and the school, in fact going down the lane that we have just been discussing, those houses on the left hand side are within the settlement policy boundary. But there are some long established houses that have been there for many, many years outside the settlement policy boundary. But they are, you know, very, very mature houses.
I won't pursue this over much, but I think, so the property, if I've got the right geography here, Hollington Corner, would that be right? Is that the property that I'm looking at properly there? That's within the settlement policy boundary there, is it?
The area that you're looking at on that...
Sorry, I beg your pardon. Oh, sorry.
The area that you're referring to, the area on the map up there, that area surrounded by red is outside of the settlement policy boundary. It's the other side of the road where the words location plan are situated is just on the corner. The settlement policy boundary extends going towards the top right-hand corner of the screen. Yeah, above that, above. There you're now within the settlement policy boundary, and going north again.
Yes. Any more questions for Mr. Murdoch? In that case, thank you, Mr. Murdoch. Next, please, Mr. and Mrs. Hobson. You will have 4 minutes, Mr. Hobson, and I'll give you a minute's warning at the end.
Thank you, Chairman. Good evening. My name is Jonathan Hobson, and I live in Hollington Lane, Walton Hill. The following comments represent the views of the 22+ local residents who have submitted written objections to the Council. We object to the proposed development because it is located outside the settlement policy boundary in an area of outstanding natural beauty, and no special circumstances have been provided in justification. Moreover, there are compelling arguments against at least 3 of the 4 reasons for approval listed in the officer's planning report. In summary, the proposed development does not represent a sustainable form of development. The proposed development would not provide safe access. The proposal would result in significant harm to the amenities of the residents in the vicinity of the site. A sustainable location should have easy access to employment, education, retail and community facilities. The narrow, unlit lane and road leading from the proposed development site to Walton Hill both have no footpaths or street lights. Walking to the nearest local shop, the post office in Broad Lanes, takes at least 30 minutes. Access on foot or by bicycle to the local infant and junior schools in the absence of pavements and street lights is neither advisable nor desirable, necessitating travel by car. Sustainability is further pressured by the number of places currently available in local schools. East End School has no places available in reception in years 1 to 3. Walton Hill Primary School is currently full and has no available places. Walton Hill Junior School currently only has 2 places available in year 4 and 2 places available in year 6. In short, the facilities and the infrastructure of the village are already operating at capacity. The planning application documentation states that contravening Save Policy D5 should carry no weight as the local plan is unable to identify a minimum 5-year housing supply. However, as members may be aware, recent appealed decisions by the Secretary of State in York, Linden Homes, and Nantwich Muller Property Group have demonstrated that a lack of 5-year housing supply is not sufficient reason to justify the special circumstances required for development in the open countryside. Precedent. While each planning application is assessed on its own merits, if planning consent was granted for the proposed development, this would necessarily create a precedent, no doubt leading to numerous similar planning applications being submitted elsewhere within the North Wessex Downs area of outstanding natural beauty, and specifically the field adjoining the proposed development. In conclusion, we believe we have outlined a number of compelling reasons why the proposed development should not proceed, and we strongly urge the committee to refuse it accordingly. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hobson. Members, any questions for him? Councillor Bound.
Good evening. Do you know whether there is any intention to expand any of these schools which you say are full, sort of bearing in mind that the number of children that are going to be entering school at school age is increasing quite dramatically as it is?
No, sadly, I'm afraid I don't know. Sorry.
Any more questions? Thank you, Mr. Hobson. Next, please, can I have Mike Fowler in support? You will have 4 minutes, Mr. Fowler, and I'll give you a minute's notice.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm the architect for the application. To give you a background history, a formal pre-application inquiry was submitted to the Council in May 2015, which was based on the scheme before you now, 4 dwellings. The response was supportive, and I quote from the officers, "In summary, residential development on this site is likely to be supported by the local planning authority in principle, given its specific location, and the layout of the development is considered to be appropriate." So on the basis of the pre-app, we then proceeded with a full planning application. The agenda states quite clearly that the officers do not consider that this site is remote. Immediately to the north east are 2 houses, the Holt is to the west, and there are extensive residential grounds of Hollington House and Garden House to the southeast. The agenda also confirms that houses on this site would follow the pattern of development and integrate with the existing cluster of houses at the junction of Church Street, the Holt and Hollington Lane. The site is most certainly in a sustainable location. The settlement boundary is but a few metres away, and as we've heard, the village does have a pub, a post office, a nursery, an infant school, junior school, doctor's surgery, village hall and church. There are also 2 bus stops within about 100 metres of the site, with buses that run 10 times a day. The layout and design of the dwellings reflects the rural edge of this village location. An informal courtyard layout has been designed, with the dwellings looking like converted farm buildings, with a manager's house. This could be the soft transition between open countryside and the major built-up parts of the village. The housing mix is also varied. Of the 4 houses, 1 is a 2-bed, 1 is a 3-bed. There's only 1 detached house, and 3 of them you can see are linked. I'm not aware that the AONB officer has objected to this application, and I wonder whether the officers can confirm that, because it was just mentioned that the AONB have objected. There's also no highway objection from your highway officers in connection with the access and pedestrian routes into the main part of the village. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Fowler from members? No? Thank you, Mr. Fowler. Next, please, can I have Councillor Sanders? Four minutes, Councillor, and I'll give you a minute's notice at the end. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, councillors. The site, as you've heard, lies outside the settlement policy boundary. The boundary was set in the old local plan, the one that started in 2006, for a very good reason, that it's the edge of what is a sustainable community for a sustainable policy boundary. And it's remained unchanged in the new plan that's being put forward. So the principle of where you've got a decent settlement boundary has remained exactly the same. And that's because there is always a danger that you will get gradual salami slicing of open countryside. And that's exactly what would be happening here, to be followed by more and more salami slicing going into what is actually an area of outstanding natural beauty. Paragraph 115 of the MPPF states great weight should be given to conserving the landscape and the scenic beauty of an AONB, and the AONB officer herself says this is likely to cause harm and cannot meet the environmental dimension of sustainable development, which is not in compliance with the NPPF, nor does it comply with paragraph 55 of the NPPF, which encourages local authorities to avoid isolated homes in the countryside. The application also fails to meet the requirement for sustainability. Two other applications for sites in another part of the parish in East Woody, outside of the settlement policy boundary, have been refused, though they are similar distances to the shop, the post office and the schools. And the inspector said in refusing an appeal, whilst it is acknowledged that the proposed dwellings would be within an existing cluster of dwellings, forming the parish of East Woody, and therefore would not be isolated in terms of their immediate location, East Woody itself continues to have limited services, and the distance and restricted accessibility to services in other villages and centres is such that the site would be considered to be isolated and the development is unsustainable. This view is also consistent with other applications that have been refused, and that appeal dates from October last year, barely 6 months ago. So to be consistent with previous decisions, this application should also be refused. You've heard from residents and from the parish council, and some of you have seen that this site is only accessible by car or by walking or cycling a considerable distance along unlit roads without pavements. Yet it proposes small dwellings ideal for young families. It would be dreadful if a young child was injured or killed because we allowed new housing in an unsustainable location. East Woody is allocated 10 new homes under the new local plan. There are already 49 homes under construction, in addition to 16 already built within this period. There is therefore absolutely no housing need in the area that is not already being met several times over. The inspector's decision on the new local plan is imminent.
1 minute.
Thank you. Probably within days. Since he raised no concerns that have not been dealt with, it's reasonable to suppose that he is going to find that the plan is sound and there will be a 5-year land supply. It will be bizarre to approve an application on the grounds of lack of a land supply, only to find a few days later that there is one. Therefore, if you are persuaded to give any credence to that argument, I would suggest that you should defer the application and consideration of it until such time as we get clarity in just a couple of days' time. Councillors are there to make sensible decisions. Can I, however, suggest to you that on the very clear grounds that this application contravenes the NPPF, section 115, that it erodes open countryside, that it will do harm to a protected area of outstanding natural beauty, that the site is not sustainable for development because of its location, and because there is a clear precedent from very recent appeal decisions on similar sites within the village, it should be refused. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any questions to Councillor Sanders? Councillor Tilbury.
You referred to the AONB officer's report. Was that one that's in our report? It just says there were no comments received, which that means maybe they didn't get it. But you seem to have. Did you have some different information?
I have a copy of a report from the AONB officer, Rebecca Davis. Unfortunately, it doesn't say who it was addressed to, but it's a full report on the subject matter, recommending. I mean, the last paragraph says, the benefit of a small addition to the housing stock is outweighed by the harm to the character and appearance of the local landscape and natural beauty in this part of the AONB. So, I mean, it's here, it's available, but it's not there, no.
Any more questions? No? Thank you very much, Councillor. Questions to officers? Councillor Tilbury, followed by Councillor Richards.
Well, I think you probably guessed what my question would be. The officer's report says that the North Wethingstone AONB, no comments received. Obviously, from what Councillor Sanders is saying, he's certainly got comments. Are they comments relating to this application? I assume they are. And could we have some clarity on this, please?
Well, we haven't received any formal comments from the AONB officer in respect to this application. They have consulted in the usual way, and we haven't had a response from them, so I'm not aware whether that report was sent directly to the parish via any conversation with them. I'm not aware of that, but in respect of formal response to this application, we haven't received anything from the office at all.
Councillor Richards, followed by Councillor Bound. We're just pausing for a moment while we have a technical hitch sorted out.
Ooh. Aha, right. Oh, Sven. Excellent. Thank you for that technical assistance, Benny. Yes.
Right,
Well
Councillor Richards, thank you.
Yes, so I just have one simple question for the officer. That is, I notice in the various objections, there were 22 independent letters of objection and various things listed here that came out of those letters of objection. As you know, I'm just subbing on this, so I actually wasn't there for the viewing. But one of the things is that I read here, the site is susceptible to surface water flooding. I wonder if you'd like to comment on that, and you know, what sort of severity and why, what causes this flooding? Or if indeed it does flood.
That's a comment that a local resident has made, but there wasn't any further detail in respect of how frequent or how often. And the site itself is relatively flat. We haven't heard any of the speakers here tonight made specific reference to there being a real issue in terms of flooding. So as far as we're aware, that may have been a one-off event, but not something that there should be major concern.
Yeah, so that means we can ignore that objection, as you see it.
The report does refer to surface water and foul water, page 91 of 155, and a condition has been imposed to ensure that adequate surface water runoff is managed. If you look at the top of page 91 of 155, there's a paragraph there in relation to that, and then a subsequent condition 20 on page 97 of 155.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, no, I see that's obviously being dealt with. Sorry, I must have missed that in my reading. Thank you.
Councillor Bound.
Thank you, Chair. I didn't manage to go on viewing, so maybe the people on the viewing panel were told, but it just says 4 dwellings. It's a full application, varying in size and form. What size are these dwellings? I mean...
I've got the floor plans before you. There's one 2-bed unit. There's the detached, one detached building, which I think is 4 beds. I think it's 2 4-beds, 1 3-bed and 1 2-bed. I think the agent, Mr. Fowler, when he was speaking, made reference to that as well.
Councillor Potter.
I wonder if I could just ask the officers to help me in terms of my analysis. I'm looking at page 85 of 155 or page 141. It's the second paragraph down, and it's the obviously the subjective, to some extent, analysis that we make about the, weighing up one thing against another. I mean, for the public record, it reads, therefore, in affording weight to the unique economic, social and environmental considerations of this particular scheme, it can be concluded that whilst the development is technically outside the defined settlement policy boundary, and I think we heard I think I've read, sorry, I beg your pardon, nearest dwelling's about 45 metres from that, it would bring about economic, social and environmental benefits for the existing village and community, whilst providing a contribution to the borough's housing shortfall. I know we've had reference to that as well. The matters are considered to outweigh the prescriptive conflict with outdated local safe policy. All I wanted, if I may, in terms of the officer that's responsible for this, was to literally get additional commentary on that summary statement that's made there to help me in my conclusions on this. Would I be able to ask for that, please?
The preceding paragraphs before that summary go into a little bit more detail about the various three strands, the social role, obviously adding to the housing provision, the housing supply position, the environmental role, and that makes reference to energy efficiency, and the reference to the benefits for the existing village and community. I mean, it can be argued that by adding and expanding an existing settlement, that you're actually helping to sustain it for the future in terms of those new occupants using facilities there, and helping the village to grow and sustain. And with reference to the outdated local safe policy, again, earlier on in the paper it makes reference to policies D5 and D6 only being able to be afforded limited weight given the outdated housing supply position.
Any more questions? No? Right. Debate. Do I have anybody? Councillor Taylor.
We've known, obviously, for quite a long time, whilst we've been preparing our local plan, we're told time and time again that we have to give really overriding weight to the MPPF, and it's been reaffirmed again tonight as we wait for our local plan to be adopted. So we have to look at the MPPF, and as I see it, and I'd like officers to check that I've got this right, there are two paragraphs in the MPPF relating to AONBs. Paragraph 116 says that for building to take place in an area of outstanding natural beauty, exceptional circumstances are required. And paragraph 115, once again, I'd like corroboration. I haven't brought my copy with me this time, but says that great weight should be given to conserving landscape and scenic beauty of the AONB. And in fact, the officer says, I believe that this development is likely to cause harm. So we've got two things that we have to look at in an AONB. One is that it's got to have exceptional circumstances, and I honestly really don't see any exceptional circumstances here, but I mean, I'm open to somebody suggesting them to me. And if we're going to give great weight to conserving the scenery, I really don't see that we can approve this one. Looks a very nice courtyard development, but it just doesn't seem to me to be in the right place.
Yes, the correct paragraphs have been referred to, but with regard to the exceptional circumstances, paragraph 116, that makes reference to, I'll read it directly here, planning permission should be refused for major developments in these designated areas except in exceptional circumstances. So 116 relates to major developments. Clearly this falls below the definition of that. We've obviously, as officers, have made an assessment in terms of the impact on the AONB within our judgment of the application, and members may come to a different view, but in our opinion we feel that the AONB will not be harmed by this application. It talks about conserving the AONB, but that doesn't necessarily mean you leave as is. So it does not preclude some form of development, provided it's not harmful, taking place.
Councillor Tilbury.
Yeah, I'd agree with what Councillor Taylor said. I think there comes a point we've got to draw a line in the sand somewhere. I think we've seen this. I came along to a committee a few weeks ago. We had one in Over, and there was a house on the edge of the settlement boundary, and yeah, there are footpaths leading to it and reasonably sustainable. In fact, there was a house the other side of it, so that was not that unreasonable. And we've had a number where, you know, they're on the edge of the settlement boundary, but this is sort of quite a way there. But this is also in the AONB, and I think if we can't protect sites in the AONB, I mean, you can argue, all right, it's only got a slight effect in the AONB, but there is a clue in the name. It's an area of outstanding natural beauty. And if we can't defend that, then we may as well just give up, you know. I mean, at this rate, I'll be following my colleague out the door, you know, because unless we're prepared to argue the case for some of these things there, we're wasting our time. We might as well just pass anything and say we haven't got a 5-year land supply. And I think Clive's a bit more optimistic than me. We'll have one in a few weeks' time, but, you know, I think it's jammed tomorrow but never jammed today with our 5-year land supply. So I would certainly recommend refusal.
Thank you. Was that a motion?
Yes, if you like, yeah, I'd recommend refusal on the grounds that it will do harm to the AONB.
Do I have a seconder, or do I have any more questions? You'll second it. Thank you. I have a proposer and a second. Oh, for refusal we need reasons. Can we clarify the reasons? He will.
Chair, I understand the reasons put forward by Councillor Tilbury, the adverse impact on the AONB with the application being outside of the settlement policy boundaries. That would be the one reason for refusal that members would be voting on if that motion is taken forward.
I want to put as clarification. I think it does concern me that Councillor Sanders seems to have information that we don't have, you know, from an officer somewhere else at the AONB that's saying that they would object to this, you know, and there is a bit of a concern that information's there that we're not aware of it. I mean, I suppose we could argue that Clive should have passed it on to us earlier, but I assume he assumed it was available to us. It is a bit of a worry, you know. We should be making decisions based on information from, you know, we do write to these people there. I mean, if they didn't receive it, or they may well think we have the information. I don't know, but it is a bit of a worry.
Chair, I can only reiterate that we, as the planning department hasn't received that information. It's not to suggest that it's you know, not been drafted in the way that's been presented this evening at all. I think, you know, members obviously have put forward a motion for refusal, which has been seconded, and obviously can come to your own conclusions on the impact on the AONB in any case. So I think it would be on that basis that the application would proceed to a vote, Chair.
Yeah. Councillor Potter.
Let's try and think of our sort of format really, but I mean, just to put it on record, I'll be voting against this motion. You're going to consider, and I'd support the officer's report, but I'll say that at this juncture, and I have, if necessary, I'll expand, but I don't know we'll get that far really, looking around the room. But anyway, that's going to be my position in regard to this next stage of the process.
Thank you. We have a proposer and a seconder for refusal. Would those in favour please raise their hands? Let's see, I'm going to vote. Those against? Abstentions? The motion is refused. Sorry, the motion is, yes, the application is refused.
Could I just, obviously we were seeking, as part of the recommendation to approve, an off-site contribution for affordable housing, so it's whether you wish the lack of the completion of that 106 agreement to be included as part of the refusal.
Committee, do you agree with that?
Yeah.
Yes, yes, thank you.
Okay, the application is refused impact on the AOMB and its location outside the SPB, along with the lack of completion of a 106 agreement to secure the appropriate affordable housing contribution.
Thank you. Right, we'll move on to item number 4. Right, they've all gone. Right, item number 4, Rhymes Barn, Rhymes Lane, Borkhurst. And I have speaking Mr. Ian Laster and Mr. Blair, and the officer presenting is Lisa Sowden.
Thank you, Chair. A full application for a 3-bed detached dwelling on a site within the countryside at Rhymes Lane, Borkhurst. The update paper notes the viewing panel details when members visited the site last week. There's no further update. The application is recommended for refusal, giving its physical and remote location with no easy access to local facilities and its remoteness from any other built form within the locality. The reasons are set out in the update paper.
Thank you. Right. Mr. Laster and Mr. Blair, you have 4 minutes between you, and you'll get a minute's notice at the end. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, councillors. My wife and I wish to build a lifetime home at Rhymes Barn, our land for over 30 years. We believe this is a sustainable development, contributing to the council's target of 15% of new homes built to lifetime standards. The plot is outside the settlement boundary, but our primary concern is our animals' welfare, and we draw attention to Councillor Musson's letter explaining problems facing Tadley residents with DEPZ restrictions and lack of places to build such homes. Parallels keep being drawn with 3 Churchbrook, whereas there are distinct differences. Theirs was an application to be the 3rd dwelling on the same site, interfering with the curtilage of a listed building. The case officer's description of our site is wrong. His words, modest field shelter, are in fact a barn, shelter, 2 stables, a shepherd's hut, 2 sheds and a storage container. Also, he counts 1 dwelling in the lane, but there are 3. Permission was granted to Manor Farm recently, despite objections from the landscape officer, outside the settlement boundary, on social, economic and environmental grounds, as it's 6 minutes walk to the bus stop. We're just 5 minutes walk from Manor Farm, so those values would equally apply to us. The new local plan defines isolated as outside 1 kilometre of an SPB and 500 metres of a bus service, as we're 600 metres from Tadley and 400 metres from Route 56, a Hayland ride that passes up Shore Lane. We're not isolated. Notwithstanding this, we challenge criteria used to reach some planning decisions. It's reasonable to walk for a Sunday paper or to the pub, but how many people get their weekly groceries on foot, bike or bus? Or DIY materials, or sacks of dog food from the pet shop? Decisions that fly in the face of normal modern life are unfair and unreasonable. Furthermore, parking standards for lifetime homes require space for 3 cars, yet planners seek to prevent the use of those cars. The case officer said, walking distances are okay for the fit, but not the elderly. In fact, an infirm person, even in the town centre, is unlikely to walk to local services. They'd call on friends or relatives, or transport from neighbour care or dial-a-ride. To determine cases on such grounds, to say in effect that older people shouldn't live in the countryside, is a wrong and ageist policy. The case officer said sheds, oil tanks and washing lines are inappropriate. Well, we wouldn't use oil and already have sheds and a washing line. Does a farmer's wife not hang washing out? The landscape officer said a dwelling will harm the landscape. Compare this with Rhymes House, formerly a 1-bedroom farm worker's shack, replaced by a 3-storey, 7-bedroom house, approved as if on a like-for-like basis. We say a well-designed house, sensitive to rural characteristics, will enhance the area. A barn-like or farmhouse-style house
1 minute
is what,
to go.
thank you, is what people expect to see in the countryside. and the Tadley design statement shows the parish is justifiably proud of such houses. We must conclude from the lack of adverse comments from passers-by and rounders associations that the landscape officer's views aren't those of the general public. As you know, planning was granted on this land before, and we also have documents showing there was a small holding here called Plumtree Pytle. Tadley Town Council have been far-sighted and seen the benefit of our proposal for future generations of the community and have given us their support. We respectfully request you approve this application. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Blair or Mr. Lester? No? Councillor Richards, followed by Councillor Bound.
Sorry, yes, this piece of land, can you first of all tell me what is the acreage of this land, and then secondly, what animals is it that you keep on this land?
The entire site is just under 4 acres, but we've trimmed off about a 1/6 of an acre to build a house on. And the animals we have at the moment are horses, although in the past we have had goats and chickens there, which we suffered losses from through people getting in and stealing.
Councillor Bound? You're not on.
Thank you. I'm referring to the map on page 112. You refer to Rhymes House, which is not on the map, but going back towards Shore Lane, am I right in saying that there's also Rhymes Gigot? And opposite to Rhymes Gigot there's another house. In fact, there are 2 more houses opposite to Rhymes Gigot. So that makes the area somewhat less sort of remote. Would you agree?
Yes, I would agree. Rhymes House is about 150 yards from us, and Rhymes Gigot and Shore Lane House both have addresses in Rhymes Lane, and they are about just over 300 yards from us.
Thank you.
Any more questions? Thank you both very much. Questions to officers, members? Do we have any questions for officers? Councillor Bound.
Yeah, I'm just questioning the authenticity, if you like, of the map, and it might be the applicant's fault. But when you don't actually place on there the 4 houses that have just been spoken of, it does make it somewhat well, it's difficult for somebody who hasn't actually visited the site perhaps to sort of know what's there.
These are the plans submitted by the applicant. Obviously, each site is visited by a case officer, so they're able to view the site in its context, so the report is accurate. And also, members attended the site viewing last week, so they were also able to see the proximity or otherwise of other dwellings in the locality.
I think I did start it by saying it could be according to the applicant, but all the same, if you didn't visit the site, then you wouldn't actually know, would you?
Thank you.
I've got one question.
Right, it's Councillor Leake.
Well, it actually says that the Rhymes Lane's in Borghurst. I thought it was all in Tadley, but I don't suppose you know that, do you?
Yes, it is in Tadley Parish. Obviously, we have to go by the address again, which is presented to us on the application forms, but in the papers it's Tadley South Ward, Tadley Parish.
Councillor Westbrook.
Thank you, Chair. Could I just ask the officers on page 104 of 155.2, I think it might even be Councillor Musson's comments, I believe. It said the site previously had substantial barns built on it, foundations of which appear to remain. This, in my opinion, shows previous buildings occupied this site, and therefore it's not a straightforward new building in a remote location. Can we have a little bit more detail on that, if possible?
Yeah, you will have seen in the site viewing there was the remains of some former agricultural building, but it's quite clearly long since gone. This is in effect a new build dwelling. It describes a lifetime home, but to all intents and purposes, it's not been put forward as any kind of agricultural or workers' dwelling, and it's not obviously the status is agricultural land, which wouldn't be considered as previously developed land in any event.
Thank you. Any more questions for officers? No. Let us move to debate then. Councillor Leeks.
Chairman, I've given this a great deal of consideration. It is outside the area of settlement, and I have to say I've tried my best to think about going for planning permission. I did support Councillor Musson for it to come to this committee, but I'm afraid that I have to agree with officers on their reasons for refusal. And a few moments ago we were talking about, I know it was 4, this is 1, virtually of the same problems. So that's all I'll say at the moment.
Councillor Potter.
Mind you, I always take pride in the fact the only consistent thing about this committee is its inconsistency, really. So we'll obviously make progress on that basis. But I mean, I'm much persuaded by the applicant's representations to us and the way that he describes the intentions of the use of this dwelling, and quite frankly, I mean, we've been here before so many times in regard to these individual sustainable or not dwellings in the countryside. I regret the fact I say this every time I know, but I disagree with the officer's interpretation once again, and I'd like to see this application approved. But I'll look forward to hearing the commentary of others, especially following previous debates this evening. But
Councillor Taylor, followed by Councillor Richards.
For me, this is a very different one from the last one, if that's what Councillor Potter is referring to. This isn't in an AONB, which makes all the difference. As I see it, and I wasn't on the site viewing, so I'd like some advice here, but there's broad local support for this, which sways me a little bit. The only objection really seems to come from the landscape officer. But if there's broad local support, that suggests to me that there really won't be that much harm to the landscape, because otherwise people would be objecting to it. So what I'm asking, is there really going to be so much harm to the landscape that we have to turn this one down? My inclination would be to approve it, actually, because I just don't feel we've got good enough reason to say no to it.
Councillor Richards.
Yeah, my tendency is, I'm thinking also the same way as Councillor Taylor's. But I notice here as well that the Tadley Parish Council actually support the application, which I find interesting. And I think the remarks by Councillor Musson in his plea here, talking about the fact that, I mean, development in Tadley of houses is somewhat limited due to the influence of the ONR. And therefore, if you're just a little way out, maybe that's more suitable for a place like Tadley in an exceptional case. Thank you.
Councillor Leeks.
Just something that Councillor Taylor said. We're never given the whether people have agreed or sent in objections or whatever. In this case, I understand that looking at the letters that came in to support it, a couple of them were from outside the area, and one was from somebody who's also tried to get planning permission, which was turned down on appeal about 200 yards away.
Anyone else?
I'd like to move the recommendation by the officers.
I have a proposal. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Bowyer, thank you. I have a proposal and a seconder for refusal. Those in favour, raise your hands. Those against? Thank you. can I have someone to... Councillor Westbrook.
Thank you, Chair. I believe there's obviously been something built there in the past. I believe it is a sustainable development in the countryside, and I don't think it's any harm to the landscape. As well, I think it's a lifetime home, and I can't really see any objections to it. I don't know if that's enough, Mike, but...
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Potter, thank you.
Yeah, I think obviously committee can come to a different view that the officers have in terms of judging the planning balance, but I'd suggest that the existence of any previous buildings on there isn't put forward as part of the reasons for approval. That can be repeated in numerous locations throughout the countryside. In as we say, we believe this is a remote location, but in far more remote locations than this. So I would suggest that doesn't carry any material weight in favour of the application. Clearly, if members feel that the application, if you like, is not isolated in the overall sense of that definition, and that there would not be any adverse landscape impact, I'd suggest they are the safer options in terms for the reasons for approval. Well, the report doesn't put significant weight on that. If members obviously want to put that in as a particular part of that, but I would suggest possibly as a single dwelling that wouldn't be a significant contribution, but it's open to members to do so.
Thank you. Now, I have a proposer and a seconder for approval. Those in favour? Those against? Abstentions? Therefore, that approval is conditions, please, and reasons. Yes.
So in terms of suggested conditions that members may like to consider, the usual time period, plans, materials, boundary treatments, during the course of the application consultation process, given the site's use for agricultural purposes in the past, the Environmental Health Officer recommended the land contamination desktop survey and verification condition, and we had highway conditions recommended for a construction method statement, cycle storage and parking, and access.
Thank you. Right, we move now to... that's it done. Item number 5. Rexford House, Plaster Green, Headley. And speaking, I have Mr. Dobbs against, Scott Masker in support, and Councillor Osselton, the ward councillor. It will be introduced by Anne Wilkinson. Thank you.
This application is for the erection of a dwelling and reconstruction of cottage with link to dwelling for ancillary accommodation and the erection of a 3-bay garage. You will see that members recently viewed the site. Since the writing of the report, we've received an additional letter from a neighbour who has already written in response to some of the comments of the biodiversity officer in the report, mainly in relation to great crested newts. The biodiversity officer has considered this additional information and has suggested that if members were minded to grant planning permission, and has recommended an additional informative in relation to great crested newts. I'm also aware that the agent has emailed councillors to bring their attention to a replacement dwelling in Plastow Green known as Scarlet's Acre, which was approved in 2008. I would just remind members that each application should be determined on its own merits, and the reference to this replacement dwelling does not provide justification for the current proposal, which would be detrimental to the character and appearance of this area of countryside. The application is recommended for refusal as per the committee report.
Thank you, Anne. Right, Mr. Dobbs, please. Mr. Dobbs, you will have 4 minutes, and I'll give you 1 minute's warning at the end.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, councillors. My name is Roger Dobbs. My wife and I have lived in Plastow Green for about 40 years. and our house is just across the lane from the site, which we know as Plasto Green Farm. The case officer's report is comprehensive and persuasive, and I won't restate its contents. What I'd like to do is to offer you in plain language a local perspective on this application. Plasto Green is a tiny hamlet, 19 houses. The residents feel privileged to live there, but we don't live in a time warp and we're not against development. Almost every house in the village has been substantially modified and extended, often doubled in size. But this has almost always been done sensitively and without provoking local opposition, so we're not against development. We'd hoped the same would apply to Plasto Green Farm, the current site, and it appeared from the original applications that that will be true, because both schemes retain the rural character of the homestead and the locality, and as a consequence there were no objections to those original applications. However, we've been taken aback by a new, radically different application that proposed a new, separate, large, formal dwelling on that site and in addition to the reconstructed cottage. This provoked strong and unprecedented local opposition, and happily, for us at least, the scheme was refused by officers under delegated powers. The present scheme is virtually identical to that refused application, except that the new dwelling has been moved next to the cottage to create the impression of a single dwelling. In doing this, it simply reinforces the yawning differences in scale, in bulk and style between what is a pretentious, poorly designed townhouse and a diminutive rural cottage. And this is in a particularly lovely location. The scheme will have an adverse visual impact from wherever it is seen, and I've only time to describe the street view. From the road you would see the cottage against the end wall of the new building, and that end wall, as you'll see from the elevations, will be a blank, windowless expanse of brick rising to the ridge line of the cottage, and it's over 2.5 times wider than the cottage, and the roof of the new building will extend vertically, obviously, beyond even that. This is just a single example of how this scheme falls short of the applicant's claims, and I use their words, that it responds in scale, mass and footprint to the site and the local context and character, that it takes account of the heritage value of the site, and that it's sympathetic to the landscape character of the site, and it doesn't result in a harmful impact on the landscape physically or visually. I put it to you that this is an ill-conceived and poorly designed proposal that would strip the heritage value of this site and forever damage the character and appearance of the locality, assets that the planning laws are intended to protect. Officers have recommended refusal. The parish council has objected. 11 local residents have objected, and there's not been a single letter of support. Given that united opposition and the strength of the case for refusal, it's difficult to understand why this scheme has even been brought to this committee. The stated reasons for referral are somewhat confused, I think. And
Can you wrap it up now, please?
The comments, the inability to save the original cottage has no bearing at all on this application. Therefore, I'd ask you to vote against this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dobbs. Do our members any questions for Mr. Dobbs? No? Thank you. Next, please, Scott Masker. I'm sorry, we didn't get your name. We got the
That's
company
okay.
name.
No, my name's Kirsten Gray, speaking instead
Yes.
of Scott Masker tonight.
Great, thank you.
Okay.
You will have 4 minutes and you'll get a minute's notice at the end.
Okay, great. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, members, for allowing me to speak tonight. I'm the agent and speak in support of the proposals on behalf of the applicant. The proposal before you, as explained, is a full application for the replacement of the original cottage and outbuildings at Plasto Green Farm, with a new dwelling and 3-bay garage. This is a resubmission of the previous refused application and for a revised scheme amended to respond to the Council's concerns. The principle of a replacement dwelling, as you know, is supported by local policy D6, which allows for the replacement of dwellings in the countryside. The principle of a replacement dwelling at this site has also been established by the previous approval. The most important issue to consider is the applicant's fallback position. The 2014 application, which approved a new replacement dwelling, the reconstruction of the existing cottage as ancillary accommodation and a linking element joining the two parts of the scheme together, along with a 2-storey cart shed. The nature of the approved application is the same as that before you today. The bulk and massing of the proposed scheme is also very similar to that approved, as can be seen on the drawing in the committee agenda, where the red line outlines the approved scheme. The officer's concerns appear only to relate to one aspect of the scheme, the proposed design of the replacement dwelling. In the committee report, national and local policies have been summarised, but I note that paragraph 60 of the MPPF has been omitted. Paragraph 60 states that planning policies and decisions should not attempt to impose architectural styles or particular tastes, and they should not stifle innovation, originality or initiative through unsubstantiated requirements to conform to certain development forms or styles. The amended scheme proposes a high-quality, comprehensive design which respects the former buildings on the site whilst also meeting the needs of our client's family. The design of the proposed replacement dwelling has 3 elements, which include a 2-storey traditional farmhouse design and appearance, a replica of the demolished cottage, and a single-storey pitch roof link section, which brings these elements together, consolidating the built form. The design takes cues from the local vernacular through its symmetrical use of chimneys and fenestration, whilst offering a dwelling of individual design, form and appearance, which contributes to the varied character of Blasto Green. Proposals also seek to respect the form and position of the former historical building, the replica of which will remain prominent in its historical position by the access, with the remainder of the dwelling projecting into the site behind. The site has a contained character, and the proposals seek to retain trees and hedgerows along the boundaries. The proposed landscaping of parts of the site previously covered by built form and outbuildings and reductions to the approved sprawling footprint of approximately 30 square metres are considered to enhance the rural character and appearance of the landscape. The proposals will have no harmful impact on the amenities of neighbouring properties, as confirmed by officers, and no objections have been raised to the scheme by the Council's highways, trees or ecology officers. It is material that the previously approved scheme remains extant and could be implemented on the site at any time. Whilst the proposed scheme seeks to take a different design approach to the approved, it would not be significantly larger, again as can be seen from the drawing. The replacement of a bungalow with a larger 2-storey dwelling at Scarlett's Acre to the east of the site, with a dwelling comprising elements of different scales and ridge heights and of a similar overall scale and character to the proposed scheme, is also material. The plans and approval for this scheme, as you've heard, were circulated to members and officers before tonight. Approving this scheme would be consistent with the approach taken in the past by the Council and would not set an undesirable precedent. In conclusion,
1 minute.
thank you. The amended scheme represents a sustainable form of development with clear environmental and social benefits through a high-quality design and the provision of a family home which is more energy efficient than the previous rambling form, which adds to the varied local character and will result in an enhancement to the visual amenity and scenic quality of the site and surrounding landscape. For these reasons, we respectfully request that members approve the application. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Gray. Now, members, any questions for Ms Gray? Councillor Potter.
Thanks, Gray. I don't know if you can help or not, really, in terms of the sort of figures that I was looking at. In terms of what you obviously described quite properly as the extant approval that the applicant already has. In terms of this proposal, which is obviously different in terms of bulk and in some areas of height, do you know? I mean, are you able? I saw the red lines on the diagrams that we had before us, really, but in terms of actual dimensions and quantitative area, do you actually have anything that would help me in terms of that, please?
Yes. So the previously approved scheme, the height of that, well, the tallest ridge height, I believe, was 7.3 metres. This application is 7.6, so it's a rise in 30 centimetres in the ridge height. In terms of floor area, the previously approved scheme was approximately 310 square metres. The current application for you today is actually 280, so it's a reduction of 30 square metres over that sprawl of the previous footprint.
Any other questions? In that case, no, thank you, Ms. Gray. Next, please, Councillor Osselton.
Thank you. Good evening, committee. Rexford House commands a large plot of land which was granted planning permission in 2013 and 2014, and I was actually present at the 2013. It was unfortunate that the small cottage under these planning consents could not be saved. At the first DC meeting in 2013, transport, sustainability, biodiversity and landscape was fully discussed and agreed to be acceptable, so it was actually accepted with the approval. Rexford House is a replacement dwelling. The old farm, as it was described, was a hodgepodge of run-down and dangerous buildings, and I actually did go around the old house before it was demolished. Under Policy E1, which I challenge, this is not a new dwelling. It is a replacement dwelling. Its size, bulk and design does not have a detrimental impact on the visual amenities and character of this rural area. And Plaistow Green has a varied street scene with a lot of additions to houses, etc. The replaced dwelling provides a coordinated and comprehensive scheme that does not prejudice the development of adjoining land. Even in winter and spring, and those that came on Friday to have a look at the actual area, found it very difficult, or I found it very difficult, to see the neighbouring properties. And that actually has been acknowledged in the impact on neighbouring facilities, which is on page 181. Under the NPPF, if we do not build and replace in the countryside, we will not ensure that we have a strong and vibrant community within the villages. Therefore, para 55 of the NPPF complies. I ask you please to approve this application as the fallback permission, in this case the extant planning permission 01147, does outweigh the NPPF. And most of the document that has been written that you have in front of you tonight was similar to the actual application that came forward in 2013, and as you see, the house is much smaller. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Wait a minute. Any questions for Councillor Osselton? No? Thank you very much. Questions to officers, members? Councillor Potter.
I'm certainly back on the same track or tack that I obviously spoke to Ms Gray about, but in terms of the figures that she has quoted to me tonight, I mean in terms of the ridge height and then also perhaps significant, the reduction in floor area from 310 to 280 square, would the officers accept that those are accurate figures that the applicant's submitting there, please?
If I can draw members' attention to the screen at the moment, what you've got there is the top drawing is an elevation of what is currently being considered, and below that we have what was previously approved. The figures that have been put forward by the applicant don't paint the whole story, so you can very much look at a footprint, but it won't take into account the height, the volume and the bulk. I haven't checked the applicant's figures. I think that there was, I picked up, I think I've mentioned it in the report, that I wasn't quite convinced at the heights that they were referring to, but I think what I would ask members to do is to consider the drawings in front of you, and you can see what was the original cottage on the right hand side, which is now proposed to be rebuilt. That was what was originally on the site with outbuildings. And then on the bottom drawing you will see that there is then a single storey link that was leading through to a two-storey extension. The current proposal is for what in my opinion a much larger dwelling. It's bulkier, it's higher, it's a much grander type of dwelling, and therefore I haven't number crunched in effect the differences in terms of number. I just think that the plans do speak for themselves.
Any other questions for officers? No? Well, can we move to debate then? Councillor Richards, followed by Councillor Taylor, followed by Councillor Bound.
Yes, I mean, reading through all this and from what I've heard, it seems to me that we're coming down to aesthetics, aren't we? Because a planning application has been granted for a similar sized building, replacing a former cottage and so on. I actually have some sympathy with Mr. Dodds, because I know what it's like when these things happen. My neighbour, or the neighbouring property to me, was originally, when I moved in just less than 16 years ago, was a bungalow, and today is something like that. Quite painful at the time when you're thinking about it, but I have to say it was completed about 18 months ago, and in fact I accept it. In fact, it looks rather good. You know, it looked frightening on paper, but the reality is that when it's there, it suits the size of the plot. It is an imposing building. I know the old bungalow was covered in brambles and trees and you could hardly see it, but it does look, it does bring something to the area that that maybe one thinks, reading this stuff, and certainly the wording in this thing where we talk about traditional farmhouses and one or two other sort of, if I may say so, slightly emotive phrases on the effect on the character of the countryside. I think, you know, I try and put this to one side and go from my experience, and actually I have no real problem with that. It is the way that development goes forward, and we are in the 21st century. You know, we no longer have outside latrines. You know, and we have to go with the way things are, and we live in an area which is rich. People here have money. They can develop land. No, but this is what happens. I mean, this is the reality of where we are, and so actually I'm inclined to support this.
Thank you. Councillor Taylor.
Thank you. I do like unusual designs, and I do like to see things that are a bit different coming forward, but they've got to be a good design. And I have to be honest, I'm with the officer on this one. I think this is just not right for this place. It's incongruous is the word, and I don't see anything of great merit in it. It just wouldn't look right in a rural location. So I'm sorry to disagree with my colleague, but I just don't think this belongs here. It's huge. And given the choice of the two, I prefer the one that's extant. Thank you.
Councillor Bound.
I have nothing really to add to what Councillor Taylor has just said. I think the design, the proposed design, is quite frankly awful. It's just too squat. It does not work as a design. The bottom design, I'm not sure I would have voted for that either, but that is the extent one, so that's the one I go with. I would move officer recommendation.
I have a proposal to recommendation. Yeah, proposal for the recommendation. Councillor Tilbury?
Happy to second that, yeah.
You want to second it?
So someone's sat.
Yes. Do you want to add to it, Councillor Potter?
Yeah, I mean, obviously you've got a proposal. I mean, I have to say, and I mean, the simple fact is design is a very subjective thing, isn't it? I used to be an architect of sorts myself, and you know, I'm sure people criticise my designs, and so they should have done, I'm sure, on many occasions. But I mean, I agree with Councillor Richards, and of the two, and this is the dilemma we have, I prefer the new proposal to the old. I mean, my subjective view is that it's consistent and it's cohesive, really, in the design, as against the original, which, quite frankly, I don't think relates to each other over well, really, albeit one could describe it as being more rural. But I don't find the new design to be incongruous, and certainly I will vote against the proposal you have before you, and we'll see where we go from there.
Right. Did anybody else want to make a comment before we move to the vote? I have a proposal for refusal. Those in favour of refusal. Those against. Right, members, I need a new motion with reasons, please. Will somebody propose it? Councillor Potter, thank you.
Well, I mean, you know, clearly it's a reversal. I mean, we're here again, aren't we, in this regard? But I mean, I'm proposing that the application should be approved, and I would argue that it's of a size, bulk and design which we would find commendable, that it won't have a detrimental impact on the visual amenities and characters of the rural area, and is in keeping with that rural location. It, on that basis, therefore complies with, rather than is contrary to, the MPPF in regard to, say, policies E1 and E6 of our own existing local plan at the time being, for the time being. So it's a reversal really of what we've got in terms of reasons for refusal, which is what we get into all the time. But that's my proposal, Chair.
Thank you very much. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Goodison. I have a proposer and a seconder for approval of this item. Those in favour, raise your hands. Those against? Abstentions? The motion is carried. Conditions, please, Anne, and sum up. Thank you.
So I would, in terms of conditions, I'd suggest to members plan numbers, a time condition, materials. I would suggest window and door joinery details. Given that the cottage is to be rebuilt, I would suggest a roof details conditions of that element of the proposal. Landscaping, tree protections being recommended by the tree officer, hard surfacing details. The environmental health officer has suggested hours of construction and delivery condition, and also contaminated land and verification conditions. Highway officer has recommended details of a construction method to be submitted, a statement to be submitted, mud on the road, location of any gates to be set back, provision of parking and turning, details of the access which is proposed to be stopped up. That I would also suggest that the cottage element which is to be rebuilt, there should be a condition to ensure that it's ancillary to the main dwelling there. I'd also suggest permitted development removal in relation to Class E, which is the outbuildings, etc. And there's also the informatives that have been suggested by the biodiversity officer in relation to birds, reptiles and great crested newts.
Members, are you agreed with those conditions?
Yeah.
Good, thank you.
The application is therefore recommended for approval as per the conditions that we've just discussed.
Thank you, Anne. Right, we move to item number 6, which is 84 Franklin Avenue, Tadley. Nobody's speaking on this, and it's going to be presented by Anne Wilkinson when you've had a minute.
This application is for the erection of a double garage with a first floor for a home office. You will see on the update report that an additional letter of objection has been received, which is summarised, and there's an officer response to any parts that haven't already been covered within the main report. The application is recommended for approval as per the report.
Thank you. Members, questions to officers? Councillor Bound, can we move to debate then, if there's no questions?
I've got a question for you.
Question, thank you.
Thank you. On page 191, in the reasons, does this mean that they would have to come back to this committee if they decided to use it for anything else, got a Home Office?
I think in particular reason condition number 4 is relevant to your question. I would suggest that the Home Office, that the whole garage with the Home Office would need to be used ancillary to the main dwelling at 84 Franklin Avenue, so they probably could use the Home Office if their children wanted to play in there as a games room or some activity that would be ancillary to the main dwelling. So it wouldn't just be that it could only be a Home Office, but it would need to be something that was ancillary to the use of the main dwelling house at 84 Franklin Avenue.
But if they decided to sell it off, sublet it, etc., it would definitely have to come back to here or be dealt with by planning, wouldn't it?
Yeah, the condition stipulates that it's not to be sold or sublet or used as a separate unit of accommodation, so...
Councillor Bound.
Yeah, this question of separate unit of accommodation. If they, for instance, decided that they're going to put a toilet in there and deck it out as accommodation, they themselves or a family member could actually live in it. Is that right?
I think it really comes down to a matter of fact and degree. I think maybe if there was somebody living in there all the time and residing in there, we would take a view that that probably would be tantamount to the creation of a separate unit of accommodation. Maybe occasionally, if maybe at Christmas, say for example, they had extra family members and they were going to sleep within the room there for the odd night, then I think we'd probably take a view that that's probably ancillary. So it really would be a matter of fact and degree, and we would judge that as and when it occurs. But certainly if somebody started to live in it quite separately, that wouldn't be an ancillary use.
Any more questions? Right, we'll go back to debate then. Do I have any proposals? Or Councillor Bound?
I'll just briefly speak, if I may, Chair. Yeah. I've asked for it to come to committee basically because the site's got a bit of a checkered history. I mean, one or two of us have been to that site before when they wanted to build, I think it was a 2-bedroom house on there. And the house, I think we turned it down or they went to appeal or something. They've also come forward with a garage proposal, which was very much like a house, and has now been changed to what you see in front of you. To my mind, if it was a garage and wanted to be used as a garage, it would be much closer to the house rather than stuck in the middle of the site where the proposal is citing it now. I think the land probably does need to be used. It's a scrappy piece of land, but as a garage I don't think it's quite in the right position. It should be closer to the house for easy access. It's stuck in the middle of this, as I say, in the middle of the site, and I will wait to see what other members of the committee have got to say.
Thank you. Any more comments? I need somebody to propose something. Councillor Taylor, thank you.
And I don't think we can turn it down just in case they don't stick to what they're supposed to. Well, obviously we'll just rely on our officers to keep an eye on that, as I'm sure they would. I would propose going with the officer's recommendation.
Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Potter, thank you. I have a proposer and a seconder to approve this motion. Those in favour, raise your hands. Thank you. Those against? Abstentions? That's it. The motion is carried. Will you sum? now move to item 7. 10 Winchester Street, Overton. Change of use from a bank to a pizzeria, I think is the expression. I have speaking for the Parish Council Lucy Sloan-Williams, objecting Dr. V. Stevens, in support Fergus Sykes, and the Ward Councillor, Councillor Phillimore, will speak as well. And it'll be introduced by Anne Wilkinson, please. Thank you.
This application is for the change of the use of the property from a bank to a hot food takeaway, the installation of extraction and ventilation and other minor external alterations. As you'll see from the update report, members recently viewed the site. I do have a verbal update also. If I draw members' attention to the report, the officer's report, under the description of the site, it advises that the application site comprises of a ground floor unit. We need a correction there in that it's actually the whole unit that is seeking the change of use. With the first floor, there's proposed to be a store, and that's where the plant's to be located. So if members could bear in mind that amendment to the officer's report, although the actual description of the proposal remains the same.
Thank you. Right. Lucy Sloan-Williams, please. You will have 4 minutes, and I will give you 1 minute's notice at the end, and you press the long bar.
Good evening. Overton Parish Council objects to this proposed change of use on a number of grounds: impact on traffic, car parking and safety, impact on local businesses, impact on residential amenity, and impact on the conservation area. The application should be refused, as it is in conflict with the NPPF paragraph 64, local plan policies E1, E3 and EC10. I will focus on 2 areas: impact on traffic, car parking and safety, and impact on local businesses. We contend that there are negative effects from a change of use of this nature that cannot be mitigated on traffic, parking and pedestrian safety. Sufficient car parking in Overton Village Centre for those using existing shops and businesses is a continuing problem. Whilst there may be presently unrestricted parking in Winchester Street, this is frequently inadequate for existing use, and an additional takeaway facility will only exacerbate the parking difficulties. The parking situation will quite frankly be dire. There is already frequent double parking near the co-op, which faces the proposed development, and the situation worsens when deliveries are being made to the co-op. Paragraph 3.3 of the Design and Access Statement states that there is a parking area to the rear of the site, and the takeaway will have the use of 2 allocated parking spaces, and these will be used by delivery drivers and customers on a first-come, first-served basis. 2 spaces in this situation is in no way adequate for a business involving a delivery service and multiple customers. These customers are not general shoppers. They are unlikely to use the more leisurely parking afforded at the London Road car park. They will want to pick up very close by and go. In terms of safety, vehicles delivering to the business, the home delivery service and customers' vehicles will interact with pedestrians on the pavement crossing the private access, as councillors experienced themselves on their site visit. This poses additional safety issues. The access is narrow, only 2.46 metres wide. There is no visibility splay on exiting the car park. To minimise risk to pedestrians using the footpath, no reversing into Winchester Street should be permitted. Officers propose condition 5 to restrict delivery times to the site of no earlier than 7:30 a.m. This is still too early for this proximity to residential properties. Local Plan Policy E10 and Policy EP3 of the Emerging Local Plan say that proposals for A5 hot food takeaway uses will be permitted, provided that they do not individually or cumulatively undermine the vitality or viability of the centre. Whilst the proposal would bring back a building into economic use and provide some employment consistent with the draft policies in the Emerging Overton Neighbourhood Plan, there are presently 5 takeaways in the village centre.
The proposal does not provide a
1
wider
minute.
range of goods and services on sale in the village, as hot food takeaways, including pizzas, are already available on offer. The individual and cumulative effect of another, run by a large company, will undermine the viability of those existing. Given the current issues with parking to access local shops and businesses, the anticipated number of additional vehicles trying to access this site will make it more difficult to reach existing ones, with consequent negative impact on their trade. In conclusion, the application should be refused on the grounds that the change of use would be detrimental to Overton as a service centre. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Stone-Williams. Members, have you any questions for Ms. No? Councillor Potter.
Hello. I just wanted to check one thing with you in terms of the officer's commentary about highways matters, talking about customers to this new facility being able to use the public car park, which is located 60 metres to the northeast of the site. I mean, as a local person, I mean, is that realistic? Can you talk to me about that?
Our experience is people really want to go and park as close to the place that they're picking their food up. It's hot food. You want it to stay hot. So you want to park outside, pick it up, pay and go. And that's what people do with the others.
Well, obviously, I'm not that familiar with people's habits in this regard, but I mean, 60 metres is accurate, though, is it? That's all they'd have to walk, is it? Okay.
Any more questions? Thank you very much, Mrs. Williams. Dr. Stevens, please. Dr. Stevens, you have 4 minutes and 1 minute warning at the end. Thank you.
Thank you. This change of use application has come to the Development Control Committee because of the number of objections received, which include negative impact on traffic, car parking and safety in the village centre, already covered by our parish councillor speaker, and impact on the conservation area. I'll focus on the significant detrimental impact that this change of use would have on residential amenity through noise, odour and environmental effects. The site is adjacent to residential properties on either side in Winchester Street and in Points Road. A takeaway of this nature proposed involves hours much extended beyond that of the previous bank occupancy, being open until 11 p.m. 7 days a week, with associated noise of clients and their vehicles and the vehicles of the delivery service. We do not agree with the statement of paragraph 628 of the Planning, Heritage, Design and Access Statement that, given the commercial nature of the surrounding area, it is considered that these hours would be entirely acceptable. The officer report's statement that the surrounding properties are commercial units is inaccurate. All the adjacent properties are residential, not commercial. I want to focus on 3 areas. Odour. The Borough Officer report recognises that noise and cooking odour are likely to be increased from the site as a result of extraction fans and air conditioning systems, and proposes to mitigate this with Condition 6. The level of the outlet is not well above the windows of properties in Points Road and Winchester Street, so cooking odours emanating from the premises can still impinge on adjacent properties and impact on residential amenity, in conflict with Policy E1 of the local plan. Environmental effects. The change in use to a hot food takeaway will result in a much increased volume of waste disposal by the business itself and by its customers. Further consideration is required of adequate waste disposal methods that don't negatively impact on the adjacent area. A condition would be desirable to avoid large bins being wheeled out for emptying very early in the morning or late at night. The main area with regard to noise, and this is the main concern of those objecting, no noise mitigation measures are possible for the additional vehicle movements expected with the proposed development, which represents a new nighttime destination. other than not permitting the change of use at all.
1 minute to go.
Car movements not only generate motor noise, but also some ground tremor and an increase of car doors banging shut. This will cause significant disturbance, particularly to number 14, a listed building with single glazing immediately adjacent, and negatively impact on the amenity of this and other neighbouring residential properties. The Environmental Health Officer review of the plant noise assessment submitted by the applicant notes that it's considered necessary to ensure noise mitigation of that plant. We're concerned that the proposed use will still result in noise and disturbance impacts on neighbouring properties, again in conflict with Safe Policy E1 of the local plan.
Thank you, Dr. Stevens. Can you switch? That's it. Any questions for Dr. Stevens, members? Councillor Taylor, followed by Councillor Potter.
Thank you, Chair. Hello. The houses that are closest to this site, are they, I know there are quite a few houses with no front gardens in this road. Are they ones without front gardens that go right onto the pavement?
Your microphone, please.
To the left on the image of the access, the property is straight onto the road, as is the property for which the change of use is requested. There is a very small courtyard front garden to the properties on the right of the proposed change.
Councillor Potter.
Can I just obviously ask for your comment on this? I mean, in terms of your commentary about the conservation area and what is proposed, I mean, would you accept that the unused bank building is a particularly unattractive building as it stands, certainly with its facade? Nothing to commend it really at the present time, is that right?
I believe my subsequent speaker is going to address conservation area matters. But in general, we would want to see this building improved as well as being occupied. We don't want to see an empty building in Overton. We just feel this is the inappropriate one for this particular location. And the application really does not take the opportunity to provide something which is more in keeping with buildings, both residential and other commercial units in the conservation area in Winchester Street.
Thank you. Any more questions for Dr. Stephen? Thank you, Dr. Stephen. Councillor Phillimore. Councillor Tilbury, do you want to speak after Councillor Phillimore? I'm sorry, Mr. Sykes first, yeah. Sorry, my apologies. God, blimey. Okay, Mr. Sykes, I'm sorry, you'll have 4 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Fergus Sykes and I'm from Pegasus Planning Group, who represent the applicant. Most of the issues I wish to speak about have been covered by your officer in their report. However, as there have been a number of objections to this application, I would still like to take this opportunity to address the committee. As you have heard, there's been some concern over the proposed opening hours until 11 p.m. The site is within the centre of Overton, and it is not considered that allowing a unit to stay open until 11 in this location would cause undue harm to amenity. As your officer has highlighted, there are other premises within the area opening until 11 p.m, and in some cases later than this. Furthermore, there are no planning restrictions on the opening hours of the unit at present, and therefore the site could lawfully be operated as an A1 retailer such as a convenience store until 11 p.m. without the need for planning permission. This material consideration needs to be taken into account when thinking of noise generated from general customer activity and vehicle movements. A full noise report has been submitted as part of the application, and this confirms that, with the inclusion of attenuation measures such as silencers and acoustic enclosures, the noise emissions from the plant and extract will be kept at a level which will not harm amenity. In relation to odours, the extraction system has been fitted with carbon filters which will treat the fumes and ensure the fumes disperse is at an acceptable level. The Council's Environmental Health Officer has confirmed this and has no objections to the proposals. Comments have suggested that the proposal will lead to additional and dangerous parking. However, the proposal provides off-street parking at the rear of the store. There is on-street parking along Winchester Street and a public car park within easy walking distance to the site. The proposed takeaway would be at its busiest in the hours between 6 p.m. and 9 p.m. and some of the surrounding businesses would be closed at these times. As such, the availability of the surrounding parking spaces will increase when demand for the takeaway is at its highest. Highways have confirmed that the area to the rear would be adequate to serve vehicles. In addition, a condition has been added to restrict the delivery times so that they do not conflict with other nearby operators. It is appreciated that a comment earlier raised that these times were maybe too early. Potentially we'd be willing to listen to a suggested revised condition which meant they did not conflict with other operators but were also a bit later so as not to cause harm to amenity. Some of the comments have been raised in relation to the fact that there's no need for another takeaway in the village. As your office has confirmed, there's only 4 takeaways as existing out of 27 commercial units, and it is not considered that 5 would constitute a harmful over-concentration. Overall, the proposal would create employment opportunities for local residents and make use of a vacant commercial unit, which would actually enhance the vitality and viability of the area. For these reasons, it is respectfully requested that you follow your officer's recommendation and approve the application subject to the necessary conditions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any question? Councillor Westbrook, followed by Councillor Tilbury.
Mr. Sykes. Dr. Stevens raised several issues in regard to the noise from the plants and the odours. And I noticed that the Environmental Health Officer asked for additional information, which was submitted, and seems to be now satisfied. I mean, how effective are these odours, in stopping mitigating the odours from these units and of course the noise with properties being so close?
Well, I mean, the condition will basically say that they should meet these decibels and they can be measured by acoustic specialists. If they do sort of are in breach of that, then and there was sort of serious complaints received, then they could be measured and tested, and if they were still exceeding what's sort of been agreed within the report, then I assume a breach of condition the proposal wouldn't be compliant with what's been approved.
Councillor Tilbury.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Sykes. In your application, you claim that you'll be providing about approximately 35 part-time jobs will be created. But if you look at the other 4 takeaways, they employ about 14 people between them. So I'm sort of struggling to understand how you're going to be employing so many people, because then they're going to be pretty inefficient, in which case they're going to go out of business quite quickly. Or that seems a bit unrealistic compared to the other. I mean, could you explain how many people they expect to be on site at each day, basically?
Sure. Obviously, won't know for sure until it's open and the sort of demand in the area. But I mean, based on other stores, sort of on average, you maybe have 50. They'd work in shifts, so you may have 15 at one time. Some of these would be members of the staff working in the store. You'd have a manager. You'd have delivery drivers as well. So yeah, sort of I'd say shifts, and usually about 15 working at one time.
Yeah, could you clarify how many delivery drivers you're expecting? Because obviously with only 2 parking spaces, that's obviously going to be an issue.
So in the day, they reckon probably at a maximum there'd be around sort of 3, and this would be towards the end, sort of 4-ish. If you think about it, probably 1 space would be sufficient to serve them, because they'd be out serving, delivering their goods. If they were sitting around trying to park up a unit, they wouldn't be working at that time. In the evenings, you'd potentially up to a maximum of 6, so they're still even unlikely to sort of have 2 people needing to park at one time, but potentially if there was 2, then you'd have the space for that.
just you say delivery, I assume you're talking about cars rather than, obviously in towns they often tend to use mopeds, but in a rural area I'd assume they may be more likely to use a car.
Yeah, they prefer using cars. There's a couple of reasons for that. Obviously, bad weather could, if you're using a moped, it could sort of damage it. Well, I mean, they obviously sort of have bags and stuff, but it's still not great. Noise from the moped engines tends to be a bit higher. There's also there's tend to be a bit more unreliable. So even in the towns, my experience is that they usually prefer to use cars.
Councillor Taylor.
Thank you. The appearance of this place is important because it's a conservation area. And you're going to be blocking off those windows at the side. What's that going to look like? How are they going to be blocked? Because they're quite prominent to me.
I believe it's just going to be film, as confirmed on the plans. Yeah. I'm not entirely sure.
Perhaps the officers could look that up for later.
Any more questions for Mr. Sykes? No? Thank you, Mr. Sykes. Right, Councillor Phillimore. And Councillor Tilbury, I'm sorry, do you want to speak after Councillor Phillimore, or do you want to, right, out? Yeah, great.
Right, good evening. Last but not least, I'd like to concur with all the points made by the Overton Parish Council and object to Speaker. I contest some of the borough officers' reason for approval as inappropriate, as they do not take account of all the relevant facts, nor the full wording of policies. I wish to emphasise the impact on the conservation area. An additional takeaway run by a national company in this prominent location will undermine the quality and distinctiveness of the Overton conservation area. The application is in conflict with the safe policies in local plan E1. Those policies state proposals for new development will be permitted provided that they are of a high quality of design. It isn't. Make efficient use of land, respect the amenities of neighbouring occupiers. It doesn't. Do not result in inappropriate traffic generation. It will. Or compromise highway safety. It could. All development proposals should respond to the local context of buildings in terms of design, reinforce attractive qualities of local distinctiveness and enhance areas of poor design. It doesn't. Policy E3 states development within the conservation areas will be permitted provided that the proposals preserve or enhance their special character or appearance. Of all the buildings within the Overton conservation area, this is presently one least in character, but the proposed frontage in a ubiquitous modern design, not taking the opportunity to enhance the current poor design to fit in with the listed buildings adjacent. It will not enhance the setting of listed buildings, rather it will further detract from their setting. Nor does the application demonstrate that the new shopfront will be in keeping with nearby commercial units. It is not enough to say that the new design will do no harm. The NPPF paragraph 64 makes it quite clear that it must take opportunities available for improving the character and quality of the area. There is no evidence that any attempt has been made to do this. Policy E3 of the local plan states that all shopfront proposals should, where appropriate, restore the architectural details in the conservation area. This application does not comply with this policy. There is much in this application which is inappropriate from permitting the change of business use, as well as an abdication of an opportunity for good redesign of a prominent building in the conservation area, and the absence of an acceptance that environmental factors connected with this application would adversely affect nearby residents, all of whom live in the conservation area. This change of usage, as inappropriate for this location, should be turned down as it does not comply with the NPPF paragraph 64 or local plan policies E1 or E3. On finishing, I would like to add that some of the comments tonight about parking are really relevant. We are God's own village, Overton. We're a medieval village built on a grid pattern, and you only got to live there 24/7 to find out what parking is actually about.
1 minute.
There's no parking in Overton at any time. and this was not going to help any way, shape or form. I'm finished. Councillor.
Thank you, Councillor. Any questions for Councillor Phillimore? No? Thank you. Councillor Tilbury.
Yes, I think so. I mean, obviously, as I think residents and the council have said, we want to see this building brought back into use, but we should take some time to try and get a building that some improvements to it, because it's rather, you can tell it's obviously was a building that was knocked down in the 60s. It used to be quite an attractive shop there. That was knocked down and replaced with a bank, which has been there and in use since mid 60s, I would guess. So, and it was built as a bank, and you can see the sort of design of it there. So if you're going to do anything with it now, it needs to be improved. Whereas what we're getting is just really a straightforward front on there, and we'll have a sign saying whatever pizza's on. We assume it's Domino's because of we looked into the name of the company who the franchise holder. But I think the biggest issue is what impact it will have on the parking, because at the moment you have a bank that only open sort of 3 days a week for fairly limited hours, whereas you'll now have a takeaway that's going to be open possibly 7 days a week from quite early till quite late. And I noticed the Domino's in Basingstoke start selling pizzas at 5 o'clock in the morning. God knows who wants to have a pizza for breakfast, but someone clearly, there's obviously a demand for it. But I mean, if we're going to have 35 members of staff and 2 parking spaces, clearly they're not going to deal with their own parking problems on there. And to say that there's plenty of parking in the village, well, actually, there's actually a gap there. Well, that's pretty unusual. But as you'll notice when you come on the site visit, you know, you're only parked there for a few minutes, and a rather irate estate agent turned up. We wanted to park at the back. There is a lot of parking at the back, and we think, well, perhaps if they can make that available. But I'm torn even with that, you know, because if you try and provide more parking out the back, it's only access through that very narrow gap, and there are no sight lines, there's no visibility space. So do you want to be encouraging more people to be driving in and out of that area there, particularly short term? It's at the moment when it was a bank, they had about I don't know, about 6 or 7 spaces, I would guess, for their staff who were there generally all day, their customers who were, you know, few and far between, for 3 days a week, and the other spaces are rented out to some local residents and some local businesses. So, you know, anything that would, if you increase the amount of parking at the back, would that make the problem better? Well, it would certainly make the pavement a lot more dangerous for pedestrians. You then come back to where are people going to park in the road? I said, as the applicants or agents said, well, obviously in the evening the shops close. Well, a lot of the shops, yes, do close in the evenings, but then the people who live in these houses come home from work, so they fill up the parking spaces, because very few have got off-road parking in the village. And, you know, as Councillor Phillimore said, parking is a major problem. And in fact, today the borough has actually started the parking consultation on the improvements to Winchester Street, which will restrict parking on there because it's got so bad. But then we have a real conflict with the residents, because the residents don't want to be restricted because they live there, but we're trying to, we've got a commercial area where we're trying to keep that going as well. You know, we want the area to be active, we want shops there, but they've got to be the right sort of shops, and a takeaway that's going to operate very late hours when we've got plenty already. It's
1 minute.
It is, you know, you just look at the numbers. Well, I really can't see how they're going to employ 35 staff when all the other 4 takeaways together employ barely 14 or 15 between them. I mean, to that inefficient, they're not going to stay in business very long, are they? But it just seems, I think that they must think we're going to live on pizzas in Overton, because I just don't know who they're going to sell them to. But I think that's covered most of the issues, but I think the parking issue is the problem, and I don't see it's resolvable. If they're going to what they're saying is correct, if they're going to generate this amount of demand, then we are not going to be able to cope with it in parking. There isn't going to be the capacity there. And certainly if the co-op lorries turn up, and they arrive all time of the day and night, because they're open till 10 o'clock now. In fact, they were open till 11 o'clock, but after an armed hold-up, they decided it was probably better for their staff to shut at 10 o'clock. So, you know, Overton's always been a bit of a lively place, but you know, I think parking is a major problem there, because of the nature of the takeaways that we do have our own nighttime economy, and of course we have the pubs as well, and some of them do takeaways as well. Oh, that's a good point. There is a car park up the road.
Your time is up.
But that one is always full of residents who live in High Street and Winchester Street. So,
thank you. Does anybody want to ask Councillor Tilbury any questions? Councillor Bound.
Could you just remind me where is the co-op? I can't remember.
it's directly opposite.
Directly opposite.
The blue car here is quite black.
Councillor Westbrook.
Well, no,
was more sort of a little bit about debate, really.
All right.
Yes, sir, I'd just be interested in the comments from Highways Engineer. Presumably parking is his sort of remit. This is a grave concern. I just wonder how you have evaluated this case.
Essentially, we acknowledge that the customers to the retail unit will be different to the bank, but the bank had customers and its customers had to also find parking somewhere to attend that site. The conversion of the unit, I bow to my planning colleagues, could actually, as been commented by Mr Sykes, under its existing use class, could change to another feature, which again, its customers would require some parking. We recognise that parking is limited within the centre itself, but to a large extent it's self-regulated, and if you can't park there, you tend to either go someplace else or plan your times. So we've actually taken a balanced view that, okay, there are two parking spaces allocated to the unit, which may well be for manager and or another and or a takeaway, perhaps vehicle. But essentially, whether the bank re-emerges as a bank or the same use class is used for a different function, which could be a shop, the parking issue in Whitchurch is going to remain the same, and the influence as to whether this is a takeaway, depending on the times of opening, are pretty much on balance acceptable.
Councillor Taylor, your question about windows.
We've had a look at the drawings and the design and access statement, and it says that the windows are to be removed, the openings are to be blocked up with brickwork to match the existing wall.
It'll just be a blank wall that side. Okay.
Any more questions for officers, or we move to debate? We move to debate. Councillor Westbrook.
Yeah, I mean, I have to admit I'm struggling on planning grounds here. I mean, the reasons for approval, it ticks a lot of the boxes, but when you come to the parking side of it, I think it's quite difficult. But the reason I'm struggling, I think, is because any business or anything else that was to go there would have the same problems. 2 cars, parking is not a lot. It wasn't a lot for the bank. It wouldn't be a lot for any other future business or anything similar. I think it ticks a lot of the boxes in regards of a much, from the site visit, a much better frontage than what's there, definitely. And there's some impact on the area with noise and odour, which seems to have been mitigated by, and the health officer's quite happy with that. But I must admit, I am struggling with the parking side of it at present.
Anyone else? Councillor Potter.
I think I'm struggling with at least 2 of the reasons for approval that are listed, really. I mean, it's difficult, obviously, to argue against reason 1, saying it will contribute to the vitality and viability of the village centre. I mean, by definition, this sort of commercial activity is bound to contribute to that in some way, quite substantially perhaps, really. But under 2, the proposed development would preserve and or enhance the character of the conservation area. I mean, I do struggle with that, really. I mean, as I indicated earlier, and I'm sure there's a history to this, of course it's a pretty awful building and facade as it exists, there's no doubt about that, and it certainly doesn't fit in well to that conservation area as it stands, and I don't think the proposals will do very much at all to enhance that in any way, shape or form. So I am a wee bit surprised, I think, at the officer's commentary on that. Similarly with 3, the proposed development would be of an appropriate design and relate to surrounding development in a sympathetic manner. Well, I don't know, looking up and down as we did, and I mean, Overton perhaps isn't, I hesitate with these words really, good job I'm not there, but isn't perhaps the most attractive of the areas in this conservation area when I look around. But having said that, I don't think what's proposed here is going to do very much really to improve that. In regard to 4, I mean, I guess it is the fact, and the environmental health officer has no objection to that in regard to undue noise, odour and disturbance impacts, and that, I think, as the planning company representative was saying, remains to be seen in regard to the practice once it starts. So it's difficult to be anything other than neutral on that at this stage, really. But I don't accept the officer's reasons for approval in at least two parts, and I'd like to see this application rejected.
Thank you. Councillor Taylor.
I agree with Councillor Potter's comments. It certainly wouldn't preserve or enhance the conservation area. It might slightly enhance that particular building, but the area as a whole, especially with those blocked-in windows at the side, it's not really going to enhance it in any way. I'm very concerned about the neighbours, and I think actually there will be quite an impact with cars parking, coming and going right in front of their front windows, because there's no buffer, no front garden. It's going to be really just alongside their front windows up until 11 o'clock at night. And there will be a lot of coming and going, because, as has been mentioned, when you go to a takeaway, you pop there and pop back again. So it's not like a restaurant where you stay for a long time. So I do think the amenity of neighbours reason is quite a viable one as well.
Thank you. Councillor Richards.
If I can just add to what Councillor Taylor has said, and it is mentioned here and said it's not valid, but with something like a takeaway, you do get people standing outside eating, throwing rubbish, possible antisocial behaviour, and that I think in terms of the impact on local residents could well be, well, it would certainly be detrimental.
Thank you. I would just like to add that the parking in Overton is absolutely diabolical, and a pizza place like that will have a permanent staff of chefs, managers. Two parking places is a joke, in my humble opinion, and because of the co-op opposite, when it's got nowhere for its lorries to go, and they're big articulated lorries, it is an absolute nightmare. And I personally am going to vote against approval. Councillor Bound.
Yeah, thank you. I agree with everything that's been said. My problem is really in that what can this building be used for? And I'd like to put that to the officers really as a sort of a comment. So if we turned it down as a pizza parlour, or whatever they're called, presumably it can come back as being something else in retail, can it, with retail, which could be equally problematical?
Yeah, I mean, it could, off the top of my head, I'm pretty certain it could change, because it's a financial, an offer use, that, yeah, an A2 use, that it probably could change to being an A1 use without requiring planning permission anyway. Yeah, could be another co-op, could be another, you know, or a shop of some type, so.
Sorry, with equal parking problems along the way.
Yes, but a shop would only employ 2 people to run it, not 4 people to cook the things, and then a bunch of delivery people. Councillor Bowyer, sorry.
Thank you, Chairman. Can I just ask the officers, could it ever be changed to residential use? Because really, that would be the best thing. I mean, the people living either side of it is residential property. This was a bank that was open 3 days a week and probably 9 till 3. And now, I mean, it must be everybody's worst nightmare that someone else comes along.
Councillor Bowyer, that is not before us, and so we can't discuss it. I'm sorry.
Okay.
But thank you. Councillor Tilbury.
Yeah, I was just going to say, well, I would recommend refusal on the grounds of, as Councillor Potter said, the reasons for the opposite of reason 2. It would not preserve or enhance the character of the conservation area. It would not be of appropriate design, and I think the parking is inadequate for the type of use. There could well be a shop You know, as you say, you could have 2 or 3 people. I mean, if you've got 15 staff on a shift, that's roughly how many there are in the co-op, which is a very large, large convenience store with a very large number of customers. Well, I can't imagine we're going to have that many. We'd have to be living on pizzas and over and there. And I think Councillor Bowie made the point about residential, and I got some sympathy with that, but the house next door used to be a shop, and the one next to that used to be a shop, and the danger is you know, the only shop up that way now is the Indian takeaway, which is quite isolated now, and you start to lose these things. So, you know, we don't want to lose it necessarily as a shop. I mean, but in some respects that may not be a bad option, but there are shops and shops, and a shop that operates ordinary shop hours is different to, you know, a pizza place that's open long hours and with a much faster turnover. It's
Councillor Tilbury, you did propose a motion then, didn't you? Yes, you did. And thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Richards. Yes.
Chair, can I just clarify in terms of before the vote is taken, the motion would be on the basis of the impact on the conservation areas and the physical alterations of the proposed, the impact with regards to inadequate parking for the particular type of use, having already considered the material considerations of the fallback position of alternative uses, and the impact in terms of amenity, given the sort of activity associated with the use. So they're the 3 reasons that I've recorded, Chair.
Are you happy with that? Right. Right. I have a proposer and a seconder for refusal of this. Those in favour? Yeah. Those against? Abstain? That motion is carried.
The application, the application is refused on the grounds that the proposal does not enhance or preserve the conservation areas. It's not of an appropriate design with regard to the physical alterations. The parking is inadequate as a result of the proposed use, and the impact on amenity as a result of the proposed use.
Thank you. We now move to item number 8. Which is an amended resolution which will be explained to us by Mr. Townsend. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This is a report just bring back to the Development Control Committee. It was an application that was originally resolved to grant planning permission in the January DC Committee for 4 dwellings at Little Bowlings. The application was approved subject to signing of a Section 106 lead agreement. That hasn't as yet been signed. During that process of checking, it came to light that the report to the Development Control Committee in January didn't record the issue in terms of affordable housing correctly. In fact, because the site area is over 0.2 hectares, it should have required affordable housing as well. The reason for bringing the report back to committee, therefore, is to seek members' endorsement of a slightly revised resolution at 3.5, which is that the resolution for the 106 should also include the requirement for an off-site affordable housing contribution, which, as I say, should have been reported on the first instance. So my apologies that the original report was incorrect.
Yeah, we have to take a vote on that. Can we do that? Can I have a proposer and a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Bound. Councillor Boyer, thank you for seconding it. Those in favour? Those against? Carried. That's, I think it is, isn't it? Right. Thank you all very much indeed. And good night.